Sometimes I'm gaining, then again I'm losing. Sometimes I'm rising, yes sir, then again I'm falling. Sometimes I'm gaining, then again I'm losing. Sometimes I'm rising, yes sir, then again I'm falling. Let Jesus work it out. Please your Father would work it out. Oh, let God work it out. Please your Father would work it out. Oh, let God work it out. Please your Father would work it out. Oh, let God work it out. Oh, work it out. You work it out for Mother Lisa. Sometimes I'm gaining, then again I'm losing. Sometimes I'm rising, yes sir, then again I'm falling. Sometimes I'm gaining, then again I'm losing. Sometimes I'm rising, yes sir, then again I'm falling. Let Jesus work it out. Please your Father would work it out. Oh, let God work it out. Please your Father would work it out. Oh, let God work it out. Please your Father would work it out. Oh, let God work it out.
All right. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is David Patrick Harry with Church of the Eternal Logos. And tonight we have an open debate panel discussing, do psychedelics lead to spiritual enlightenment? And so I hope many people, both for and against, are able to hop on, of which wherever you are viewing this stream, there should be a link in the video description to give you access to the StreamYard casting that we're in right now. Looks like we already got Ivan ready to go. Shout out to you, brother. So we're going to just open up, address the topic, and then allow people to hop on and give their 2 cents. So obviously, those of you are familiar with my work know that I was quite heavily invested into the psychedelic scene for many, many years. Throughout my undergraduate, my master's degree, even into my PhD program in Berkeley, created tons of content promoting Terence McKenna, Timothy Leary, Robert Anton Wilson, Alan Watts, very much invested in the whole Jason Silva, New Age, Psychonaut, transhumanist scene and all that different stuff, and eventually got out of it. And I've talked publicly about I haven't had a high dose psychedelic experience in years now. And obviously now I'm Orthodox Christian. You can see these icons behind me. And I laid a little bit out of that journey, or at least the differences in those spiritual paradigms in my last stream, talking about drug mysticism. And then we got into a paper that I wrote regarding the use of psychoactive substances from the ancient mystery traditions up to Aleister Crowley, and how those continued and were perpetuated into the Western esoteric traditions. So when I was interested and deeply invested into psychedelics, people get involved with drugs for many different reasons. Can be recreation, could be fun. Obviously, with John Hopkins, now people are being utilizing MDMA, low dose psilocybin, potentially higher doses of psilocybin for PTSD and stuff like that, getting over traumatic events. Rave culture, concert going, festival culture. For me, I was so invested. I remember as soon as I got into the psychedelics when I was, I would say 21, 22 years of age, and I was already pretty much a heavy cannabis smoker at that point. During my 20s, smoked about every day. And I thought this was the epitome of the religious experience. And so doing high dose LSD, psilocybin, those were usually my 2. Now I've done ayahuasca ceremonies. I was big into DMT, doing high dose, smoking, getting as many rips of DMT as you could to get it, as blasted as far as you could go. And for me, it was very spiritual when I got into it. So I was looking for, you could call it spiritual gnosis. You could say spiritual experiences, mystical encounters, hearing voices. Again, I have a quick video we're going to play before we start bringing people on in regards to Terence McKenna, Ram Dass, Richard Alpert, and then Timothy Leary, all discussing like the psychedelic experience and how this relates to enlightenment. For me, I thought, for sure, again, at that point in my life, I was very much invested in the whole stoned ape theory. I thought McKenna, psychedelics were the key to everything. I thought, well, all religious experience is based on some sort of secret use of inebriating substance. Could be the Kikekion and the Eleusinian mysteries, or Soma for the Rig Veda, or whatever it may be. But for me, I remember specifically thinking, after I had done tons of sessions, high dose sessions, it was I felt like I was kind of in a cul-de-sac. It's like, where exactly was I going with all this stuff? Do I just keep taking higher and higher doses? That I remember the last 2 high dose experiences, and this is where I want to lay this out before we start opening up the panel, is that, yeah, I'm quite familiar with the use of psychedelics. I've used a lot in my life, and I used a lot before I became an Orthodox Christian. And Eastern Orthodox Christianity is very different than the Western forms, be it Catholicism, Protestantism, or whatever it may be. But I remember after doing a whole semester on the history and theology of the Eastern Orthodox Church, that I was very much interested in this idea of logos theology, the metaphysical structure, the demiurgic structure that, again, we would hear from Heraclitus and Plato and Aristotle and the Stoics and the Neoplatonists, and of course in the Gospel of John, in arche in ho logos, in the beginning was the word was with God, and the word was God. Now that word, obviously in the Greek, is logos, and logos is this concept that was central to the Greek philosophical system in regards to that metaphysical structure that unified opposites, the basis for these non-physical things like logic and numbers and language, right? These things, meaning, these things you can't touch. Where do they reside? How are they real? For the Greeks, it was metaphysically rooted in the logos, which then Christianity is making the claim that that logos incarnated in the person of Jesus Christ. So I had done this whole semester. I was like, wow, that theology, that's pretty interesting. If I was to become religious, I would probably pick that one. And I did do a high dose LSD session. This was, again, the next to the last time I ever took psychedelics. And I remember laying in my apartment in Berkeley, California, and realizing that my spiritual worldview that I had as a spiritual, not religious, psychonaut, new age person, I was doing my PhD, doing my research, and even studying the utilization of psychoactive substances in regards to religion. And I realized, geez, all these things that I really can't account for in my worldview, like, again, a metaphysical structure for sacred geometry, for fractal mathematics, Mandelbrot sets, for language, the idea that the importance of language, the idea that the logos, the second person of the Trinity, is in fact God's word, the expression of God. And that's what, again, that's how we understand Jesus Christ. So this LSD experience led me to realize that really I needed to get more serious about my worldview and be able to philosophically justify these things that I really believed in, like an objective morality. And that's going to be a question that, as we bring people on tonight, whether they're for and against, is the objective morality. The first video I'm going to play is of Terence McKenna, again, a great advocate for psychedelics, saying that psychedelics have nothing to do with morality. And so if you're talking about psychedelics in regards to the spiritual pursuit or spiritual development or spiritual enlightenment, and you consider spirituality tied to morality, again, as I laid out in my last stream, these are actually two different structures. If you do believe that spirituality is tied to objective morality and living a moral life, even McKenna claims, well, I don't think psychedelics have anything to do with that. Psychedelics aren't about objective morality. And this is what I was trying to highlight in my last stream about these are different paradigms. And the pursuit for Satori, again, a Zen Buddhist understanding for like immediate moment of like perception, clearer perception. Yeah, people seem to have these on drugs. Satori, is it about the pursuit of gnosis? Is it about an ego death, right? This is a common motif in regards to the utilization of drugs, is that, well, what they do is they dissolve or they kill your ego. And this then allows you to realize that you are not I'm not David Patrick Harry. I am a substantiation of cosmic consciousness, therefore experiencing myself as a human. This gets back in the whole Alan Watts, this sort of cosmic monism. Some people claim that is the illuminative enlightenment experience. Some people describe the realization that we're all one, just total pure unity, a sort of complete monism. Some, again, like I said, believe that the deeper dives you go into these altered states of consciousness, the more spiritual gnosis you acquire. And this spiritual enlightenment then is a journey about the acquisition of knowledge, the acquisition of rational understanding in regards to higher realms and all this different stuff. Again, all these things have nothing to do with objective moral structures. And that's why you can look at psychedelic spirituality and, orgies, homosexuality, transgenderism. These things are going to be much more celebrated as expressions of that cosmic consciousness in your unique human experience. Very different from, again, a more spiritual paradigm, whether it be something like Islam or, again, Christianity, generally speaking, especially Orthodoxy is very strict about these things. Not going to be so much interested in the radical acceptance or sort of nominalism in regards to self-expression. So these are important distinction in regards to these worldviews. And so I hope if somebody listening here is a major advocate for psychedelics, you think, yes, psychedelic substances absolutely bring you to a clearer perception, a higher understanding. They move you towards the enlightenment state. I hope that you jump on. Again, the link is in the video description. I personally do not think that, again, it comes to how do we define enlightenment? And I do subscribe, obviously, due to my Christianity, I do subscribe to a spiritual paradigm that morality is essential for one's spiritual progress and development. And so for me personally, I don't think you could know everything you want to know about world religion. You can know everything you want to know about mysticism or conspiracies about the world or how things work. And I don't think that makes you illuminated. I don't think that makes you enlightened. I don't think it brings you closer to God. I really do, in my worldview, believe that it has to do with morality. It has to do with the way in which you live your life in accordance with an objective structure. And that's what your judgment is once we die. Whether it be Egyptian mythology, where you have Anubis with the scales and he weighs your soul against the feather, right? And if your soul's too heavy, that means it has too much detritus, it has too much baggage. You don't make it into the afterlife. Well, so many mythologies throughout human history have always talked about a judgment day, a judgment. But again, what is the judgment? If there is a judgment, there has to be an objective standard. What is the standard? Now, within psychedelic spirituality, I've heard, again, it's very different. You can call it psychedelic mysticism, psychedelic spirituality. However, those that are in favor of it call them entheogens, which I don't use that term because it has a theological connotation that these substances enliven the God within yourself. That presumes the idea of already accepting that paradigm. But the question is, what is the standard of judgment? That should be the basis then of our spiritual progress and our spiritual journeys. I argue, and we'll open this up so anybody who has any opinion can jump on. I argue that psychedelics are not in favor of a more stricter moral life. I believe that they do phenomenologically dissolve boundaries, and that this is good if you have a PTSD or you have some sort of trauma. I think that's why the therapeutics in regards to some of the research that Johns Hopkins studies, using MDMA, using psilocybin in lower doses. I think when people do have PTSD of something, it makes sense that the phenomenology of these substances do dissolve boundaries and allow people to move through traumas, barriers that are in front of them. However, what exactly is real? Because if psychedelics and the psychedelic experience is then equal to spiritual enlightenment, that is a subjective understanding, right? I mean, is truth objective or is truth subjective? These are fundamental questions in regards to today's debate and open panel, is how do we come to understand these things and what is the standard? What is the standard? So do psychedelics have anything to do with morality? I argue no. I argue that that's a totally different spiritual paradigm. I argue that's why many people in favor of these substances are going to be typically left of the political center. Not that they're related to politics or anything, but generally speaking, that just seems how it sort of unfolds in our culture. And do psychedelics open you up to a spiritual world? I say emphatically yes. And you'd say, well, Patrick, you're saying that they don't lead you to spiritual enlightenment, but you're saying that psychedelics open you up to a spiritual reality. Yeah, I absolutely believe that psychedelics open you up to a spiritual reality. No doubt about that. I had done too many experiences, had done too many drugs to not think that especially when you get into the higher doses, when you get into, again, like the heroic dose, the 5 dried grams or something like that. Yeah, there's something going on there. Now, the question is then, are all the entities you encounter good? Are some of them bad? Are some of them tricksters? Are some of them helpers? How do you know the difference? What's the standard? What's the objective spectrum that we're going to use to judge something on, right? And so that's going to be a real question. So without further ado, I don't want to have a big opening monologue. I want people to hop on here. So guys, smash that like if you're watching, wherever you may be seeing this stream at. I'm going to handle a few quick announcements, guys. The second half of the last stream I did on drug mysticism, from the Alicinian Mysteries to Aleister Crowley, the second half of that is already up on my website. So if you want to see that, let me show you guys. If you want to see that, that is up on the website. Also, if you want to have access to that, then you need to become a website member. And the best way you can support my work is by becoming a website member. You can do so with this link right here. I would greatly appreciate that. Also, if anybody would like to sign up for a one-on-one session where we can dive into anything that you would like, be it world religions, be it Christian theology, be it philosophy, or whatever it may be. You can have my undivided attention by signing up for a one-on-one session right there. And then if you would like to sponsor a stream, we got some great sponsored streams coming up. I'm really excited about one, again, diving into John Scotus Erigena and his Neoplatonic take on Christian theology. Again, for those of you who aren't familiar, John Scotus Erigena is probably the most important Christian theologian, philosopher of the Carolingian Empire. And so that's Charlemagne. That's the beginning of the Holy Roman Empire. You guys know that. And his whole thing, now he's not a saint because he was Neoplatonic in his framework, but shout out to Jeffrey Ivey. We're going to be diving into that in a sponsored stream. So if you have a topic you'd like for me to tackle, you can definitely sign up for a sponsored stream. I would greatly, greatly appreciate that. Okay, so now we're going to play a quick videos because we always want to steel man arguments here. We don't want to straw man anybody. So I'm going to play 3 quick videos, one of Terence McKenna, one of Richard Alpert, and another one of Timothy Leary, all describing the sort of psychedelic experience. And I'm going to bring people on and we can begin our open panel discussion and debate. Do psychedelics lead to spiritual enlightenment? And wherever you're at, feel free to hop on. This is, if you want to get contentious, that's okay too. It's totally open. The link to join should be in the video description. So here's the first one. Terence McKenna. I think he's probably out of the 3, even though Timothy Leary was so noteworthy in regards to his activities at Harvard. In 1963, gets kicked out, moves to Millbrook, upstate New York, 64, 65, 66, 67, moves out to San Francisco. 67 is The Summer of Love, Haight-Ashbury. Woodstock's 1969. He gets arrested, 1970, 71, later gets out. But I would say the person that is probably the most prominent supporter of psychedelics is Terence McKenna. So here is his opinion on psychedelics. Now, you can already tell by the title, psychedelics are irrelevant with the spiritual quest. But this is his opinion. I'm going to speed it up because he's a bit of a slow talker. This is his opinion in regards to how psychedelics relate to the spiritual experience.
One of the questions that's worth talking about, because I've never made up my mind about this, is the psychedelics are always cast as an option in the spiritual quest. You can study yoga or meditation, or you can take drugs, or you can do good works like Mother Teresa or something like that. I've never been absolutely certain that psychedelics have anything whatsoever to do with the spiritual quest. If we define the spiritual quest as that which impels you to the moral life, then I don't really see, I don't understand. I certainly have taken a lot of psychedelics. I certainly am no moral exemplar, nor have I ever felt pressure to be one while on a psychedelic trip. The mushroom has never said to me, as a leader of the people, you should be a better person. Inevitably, these spiritual hierophanies tend toward a vocabulary of unity and light and completion. And that's not the vocabulary that I would apply to the psychedelic experience. The psychedelic experience is weirder than that. It's about, self-transforming elf machines from hyperspace kicking down your front door and rotating all 4 tires on your after-death vehicle and also checking the radiator. Is that a spiritual experience? Hell, who knows what kind of an experience it is.
You use psychedelics in a very limited sense to your spiritual tripling with psychedelics. There are, of course, many psychedelics where you don't have atoms running around.
Well, I call those things psychoactive, but you're right. They're psychoactive. See, here's the thing. I mean, there's a series of declensions here. There's psychedelic, there's psychoactive, and there's altered states. There are hundreds and hundreds of altered states, most non-drug. And then there are altered states of consciousness, which are drug-induced. I can feel an aspirin hit. I mean, I actually can feel the shift in my reality from 2 buffered aspirin. And then, of course, there's caffeine stimulation and downers and all of these things. None of this is psychedelic in the ordinary sense. And the psychedelic experience for me is this very narrowly defined thing where you see visions. Hallucinations aren't even sufficient, because there are all kinds of hallucinations, moving grids of color and little swimming things, and then you get the mice dancing in rows and the little candies floating by, and this, you can't build a pyramid out of that kind of stuff. But the real vision is a very mysterious thing, impossible by rationalist standards, and we all are rationalist enough that even in confrontation with it, we know that it's miraculous. So a thing worth thinking about and worth talking about this weekend is whether or not the psychedelics are in fact part of what is ordinarily thought of as the spiritual quest or the quest for religious understanding. There are people who take psychedelics who don't have an iota of spirituality in them. If you're interested, there's a very interesting book called Shamanism, Colonialism, and the Wild Man by Michael Taussig. Michael Taussig, I dare say, would be very uncomfortable in this room. He would dismiss us all as fruits and flakes because he's a Marxist labor organizer. There is no vertical gain in this guy's worldview. And yet he's taken more ayahuasca probably than anybody in this room and been loaded, thoroughly loaded. So it's very interesting to read his book and garner his conclusions. He sees it in an entirely different way. I think it is a way to access insight, but it doesn't seem to support the Neoplatonic hierarchy of ascending light and space that is the assumption of Western religion. There's no white light at the end of the tunnel in psilocybin. Instead, there's the alien edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica. Maybe that's a spiritually enlightening thing to encounter, or maybe not. Yeah. LSD fits. LSD is more classically psychoanalytic, number one, and number two, supportive of the metaphors of Western religiosity. It does move you toward the dissolving whiteness, the oneness with the unspeakable of Meister Eckhart and that crowd.
In the Harvard experiments, originally Leary and Albert, they used psilocybin with these.
Well, but they put them in a chapel on Good Friday. Well, so the set and setting then highly determined the trip.
Okay, so that is the first one there, and then here is honestly, I may skip this one. The audio is a bit hectic. I don't know if you're going to be able to hear it clearly.
I don't think there is much doubt about it for you and me, for many of us, that at least psychedelic chemicals, not all drugs, but psychedelic chemicals, have a capacity to cut through places where you are attached and clinging, to set them aside and show you a possibility. The problem is that they don't allow you to become the possibility, they only show you the possibility. And then after a few hours, you lose the view of the possibility and you have it only as a memory. I made a very genuine effort in 5 years of drug taking to use that as my full upaya or way, and it didn't work because I just kept going up and coming down. And Maharaji, my guru, when he took LSD, he asked me for that medicine, that yogi medicine I used, and he swallowed a huge amount that would have freaked anybody in this room. And nothing happened to him at all. And then he said, well, these are known about, these chemicals. And it will allow you to come in and have a visit with Christ, but you can only stay 2 hours and you're going to leave. He said it would be better to become Christ than to visit Christ. But this medicine won't do that for you because it's not the true samadhi.
Okay. And this was a Millbrook lecture with Timothy Leary. I'll just play a few minutes and then we're going to get straight into the open panel. Again, guys, join the stream if you want to debate. We already got Ivan in here. So the link is in the video description. I'm also going to share the link right now. So if anybody wants to join, you want to give your opinion, you want to, if you're in support, again, my position is psychedelics do not lead to spiritual enlightenment because there's no objective standard for what exactly is enlightenment. And as I laid out, I believe in more of a moral stricture for the spiritual journey. So if you disagree, feel free to hop on and voice your opinion. The link should be in the live chat. So we're just going to play a few minutes of this, and then we're going to dive into the open panel. We had one super chat came in from Dean Lim 2, throws in $4.99, says, hey, DPH, do you think there's a level of spiritual understanding that may be missed if you abstain from taking psychedelics? That's an interesting question. Certainly, certainly if you do take them, there's radical experiences at hand. But when you say spiritual understanding, I would say no, because what is the standard? What is the standard for understanding? What is the goal? Um, can they help you know more about yourself? Potentially. Can they bring you to more deeper delusion? Absolutely. That's a possibility. I've met many people. I look back on my life, people that never got out of it, that were still in the rave, the festival group, taking psychedelics, high doses, partying. And I look at their lives now in 2023, and it's not anything that I want to emulate. And I see that their lives have fallen apart in many ways. They never really built anything. They are struggling. And some of them I know personally ended up eventually getting into more serious drug addiction. Now, is that tied to psychedelics? Not necessarily. Psychedelics are not addictive because they're too radical of an experience to do every day. Although, what was it? Connor Murphy was microdosing ayahuasca every like 3 hours or 6 hours or something. And then again, he had a psychotic break eventually. So it depends on who you are. I think to just give a general statement that psychedelics may not lead you to enlightenment, but a deeper level of spiritual understanding, I don't know. For example, I had friends that got into it that they weren't really into the psychedelics because when they did do it, they had a terrible experience. Could be their internal state, could be traumas they're dealing with, could be things within their own psyche that they haven't addressed. I don't know, but that's when we make these large generalistic claims. I think it depends. I did not have. I did a lot of trips. I did not have highly demonic, scary, dark experiences. I remember maybe one or two you could say were teetering on that precipice, but it depends on who you are. And so for me, spiritual understanding has to do with an objective structure, and it's tied to that morality. And so I think no matter what you experience in regards to the phenomenology of the unification, that we're all one people, that we're all one human nature, that we are stewards of creation. I think you can come to those realizations without the drugs. Somebody said that they're sort of a spiritual junk food. Can they aid in certain ways? Yeah. As I said, my last psychedelic experience was going to an ayahuasca ceremony. And this was right before I was already getting into sort of Christianity. I had a YouTube channel called Fractal Universe, and my life was taking me in a different direction. I was living in Berkeley, California. I was seeing people literally explicitly say that they were in support of people who identified as minor attracted peoples. I thought that was horrendous. And these same people were very much in favor of everything that I was doing in regard to the promotion of psychedelics, you could say ritualistic magic, esoteric spirituality, stuff like this. And I'm thinking, what? How can you guys be supportive of minor attracted persons? How could you be supportive of changing the age of like sexual consent among, adolescent people and adults? And that sent me on a quest to like begin to look deeper and come up with these objective structures. So for me, I eventually came to the conclusion that there is an objective moral structure, that God did incarnate as a human person. His perfect heart is the standard in which all of us are judged. And that slowly but surely led a long trajectory in which now I'm, 6 years into becoming an Orthodox Christian, where I view things very differently. So that last ayahuasca ceremony, which I was getting into sort of Christianity and Orthodoxy, and I knew I didn't want to be a university professor anymore because you can't talk about certain things. You have to take certain medical procedures, again, 2020, when they're required of you. You don't have any say. I was in Berkeley, and I remember John Searle, the most famous philosopher still living. He's an analytic philosopher. He'd been a tenured professor at Berkeley since the 60s. He had famous debates with Foucault and Derrida. And he asked a woman who was like, I think it was like 30 years younger than him or something, out on a date. And he was fired, a tenured professor, for sexual harassment. And so I knew that I didn't want to be relegated to a university tenured position, because the university can then take away or give you whatever it wants. And so I went to this ayahuasca ceremony, and I had just broken up. I was, broken up with the girl at the time. I wanted to reestablish my life. And then my mom got sick. She has a rare form of muscular dystrophy. And I remember doing that session, and basically my experience, and I'm not attributing it this to grandmama ayahuasca for my, the validity of whatever my experience was, but mine was, I did a high dose of ayahuasca during the ceremony. It started to kick in. We're seeing tracers, lights, colors, closed eye visuals. And the idea was that there was an objective standard. It was Jesus Christ. That it was time for me to to build. Christ was he was a carpenter, and that my whole life was about consuming. I was consuming drugs. I was consuming porn. I was consuming lectures of other people. I was producing visuals from their content. I was just a consumer. And it was time for me to be a producer. And I think this switched also in regards to how I viewed my own masculinity. And so did ayahuasca do that? No, because the ayahuasca stopped working. As soon as I got the message that it was time for me to build and Jesus Christ was the standard, I kid you not, I took more ayahuasca. I went to the shaman, took more, and it just stopped working. It would not work the next day. It would not work. And I took that as a message from God, and I've never done high dose. I've never done psychedelics since. And so, some people will say, well, you had to take the drugs to get that message. I would disagree. I think that God protected me, gave me an insight, and then I did what I feel like I needed to do with it. So again, if Dean Lim too, if you have a position or somebody else has a position, feel free to hop on tonight, because that's exactly what we're going to get into. So thank you so much, brother, for the super chat. Would greatly, again, appreciate anybody sending in some super chats tonight. If you would like to, you can use the Streamlabs link or YouTube. So here, anyways, without further ado, let's do the last audio clip of Timothy Leary, and then we're going to dive into the open panel. Ivan is here. Guys, join. If you got an opinion, you want to voice your opinion, feel free. Here it is right here, the link. I'm posting it again. Hop on and voice your opinion. Okay, last one here. Let's do this.
Dr. Leary, LSD has made you either a prophet or a pariah. What fashion would you use, or how would you summarize your own experiences with the drug? What has it done to you, to your mind?
First of all, we have to ask the question, what is LSD? LSD is a chemical, but it's not a drug. Most Americans are familiar with two drugs which change consciousness. Drugs which put us into a stupor, drugs which wake us up. Almost every American uses one of these two. We use opiates or tranquilizers or alcohol to put us into a nice, cozy stupor, or we use drugs like pep pills or even coffee to wake us up. But there are many other levels of consciousness, many other levels of awareness which can be triggered off by chemicals. Now, LSD is not a drug like alcohol or a barbiturate. LSD is a chemical which contains several hundred Encyclopedia Britannicas. So when you talk to someone who's taken LSD, or if you have a senior who's taken LSD, his consciousness is being spun through many, many different levels of language, which are not the language of English or French or Latin, but chemical languages of cell and nervous system, sense organ, which are many millions of years old. What's the reaction to taking LSD? If the person is unprepared and he swallows this local library of chemical messages, he's confused. He can be entranced and delighted, or he can be very frightened. Most of the people who develop what we call an LSD panic are people who take LSD not knowing what's going to happen. They think it's like a martini, or they think it's like a pep pill. It's not at all. It's a highly complicated engaging of nerve tissue and cell tissue within inside, which throws you into energy languages for which many people are not prepared, thus the confusion and the fear.
Okay, so for Leary, you can see that he and Ram Dass both attributed psychedelics to leading and to enlightenment. For Leary, it was more about a sort of acquisition of gnosis. So he's talking about the mind moving through different languages, libraries of information, about a sort of rational apprehension of certain ideas and concepts. For Ram Dass, again, in his spiritual worldview, which I'd totally be against. Obviously, he was also bisexual, so he was very much in favor, again, of that distinction that we were highlighting about the plurality between objective structures. And he said, well, you just got to become Christ rather than visit Christ for 2 hours. Well, I don't think you become Christ by meditating or taking drugs or engaging in sexual practices. I don't think Christ did any of that stuff. And I think that's the point of why God incarnated as a man, me personally. So, and then we heard Terence McKenna, who said he really focused on the absurdity and the sort of abstract surrealness of the psychedelic experience, and said it has nothing to do with morality. And so if your spiritual worldview is tied to morality, he says psychedelics have nothing to do with it. So now we got Ivan on. Guys, anybody, feel free. Anybody can join, no matter where you're at. If you're on a phone or whatnot, if you are for and against, come on. Come one, come all. Ivan, what's up, brother?
All good over here. Actually, when you were relaying your story, I felt like we had some similarities. I wasn't such a big pothead when I was in my teens, but I did consume pot. And slowly over time, my friend group started getting into raves and all those kinds of things. And since I liked the music and I liked clubbing and I liked women and all of that and electronic music, I started consuming Molly and acid afterwards. And I've had a few spiritual experiences from that. And one of them was pretty intense. And I saw Christ, and it brought me closer to God. But I wouldn't attribute it to the substance itself. It
Right.
had to do more with my own spiritual journey, because I was getting closer and closer to Christianity. And it was part of the reason why I decided I would never take drugs again, because I started seeing the demons that were like infecting my friends. Like I could see how the psychosis that was induced by the drug brought about like a lower aspect of their soul. So they were like acting unawares of themselves, acting on very base psychological impulses that were, I would say, probably demon inspired. And there was a lot of homosexual things going on, a lot of like crazy, unsettling things. And I decided that I wouldn't hang out with those people in those settings ever again, because I was creeped out by it. And it wasn't just my own paranoia about it. Like I was already deep within like a spiritual search. So whenever I was very attuned to seeing the spiritual patterns. So it was more like let's say, God could use that experience to bring you closer to him, but it's not for that. Like,
right. Yeah, I totally agree with you. My experience was not that the last LSD experience or the ayahuasca experience, the drugs brought me to God, but that I was already working in my sober mind. Like, again, before that LSD experience, I already began to pray for the first time since I was a little kid. I had not prayed, but for some reason I felt called to like pray before I went to bed. And it made me feel better. And I noticed when I did certain things, I didn't want to pray, like watch pornography and masturbate, to degenerate images. And that was a sort of subtle realization, but I think that colored then why I had this experience on the LSD, that, oh, well, I can keep so much of what I like about the psychedelic spirituality, the colors, the aesthetics, the sacred geometry, the fractals, the spiritual understanding of language, the power of the word, logos, all this different stuff. It just, the only thing I had to do is I had to adopt the morality, and that then changes the entire paradigm, the entire worldview. And then same thing with the ayahuasca. I was in a pretty lost place looking for questions. And then when I did that, and it stopped working, I mean, that was it for me. I had done so much drugs at that point that it was so astounding that even happened, that I was basically set on my journey. And then now it's 2023. So this is, 4 years later. And it's just, it's surreal to see the journey. And so, yeah, for me, I don't think the drug now, when I look back on psychedelic use and all that, it was some of the most, fun, exciting times of my life, but in regards to the development of myself as a man, the develop myself as what I would consider spiritual progress, I don't think it aided. I think I was hedonistic. I was so into my own pleasure that it wasn't about me developing discipline and like what I consider real virtue today. And so, yeah, so I think we do have a lot overlap there.
Yeah, when I was stuck in psychedelics for years, following around String Cheese Incident, going to all the jam band festivals, being a crunchy wook, at the time I thought these are like the best experiences, and there's only one time that I had what I could call like a bad trip, quote unquote.
Yeah.
But looking back, yeah, they're fun, but I mean, in the moment isn't like any kind of sin, quote unquote, fun. That's why you're doing it. So when people try to use that as an argument, and I remember last year we had to ban someone from the Orthodox Christian Discord server because they were trying to tell inquirers to do psychedelics to get closer to God. And we explained to him, like, it's just like what you guys said. And this is all I want to hop on for, because I've been deathly sick, so I can only talk for so little.
Well,
but
glad you hopped on, Jace.
It is that, God will use our stupid decisions,
right,
to bring it to bring a good out of it, right? Like, it's not good that I was at music festivals eating 20 to 30 hits of acid at a time. That's not a good thing. No. That's a terrible thing. But he protected me, and eventually when I listened, he brought me out of it. And just like with your experience the final time that you did psychedelics, it's not that you had to do that to get to this point. It's like, no, I was at this point and I opened up enough to listen, and God used my decisions to reach me, and I participated at that point. And similar to you, Ivan. And I think that's every time I hear people try to argue as an Orthodox Christian that it's a positive thing to do psychedelics. And we're not talking about, the odd cases of, I'm sure that ketamine can help people, like light doses of ketamine in medicinal. Right. I'm sure that can help. We're not talking about that. But it's always just emotional, and they never see that, no, God bringing something good out of us doing something bad isn't encouraging us to do a sin.
Right. And that's what I tell people, is that God can meet you anywhere. And it really has to do with your heart. And like how serious are you trying to pursue truth and understanding? And I think that colors the ways in which he then can encounter you in any space. And then the next question I have for you guys is, psychedelics open you up to a spiritual realm. I mean, I would consider that they absolutely do that. So it's not one or the other. I think, no, they don't lead you to spiritual enlightenment, but yes, they open you up to a spiritual realm. Do you guys mind giving your opinion on that? And it looked like we had somebody say we're in an echo chamber. Well, you feel free to come on, brother. Anybody can come on and voice their opinion. Like, if you disagree, we would prefer you to come on. So if you are in favor of psychedelics and they bring you closer to God, please come on and make your case. Again, the link, I'll post the link again right here in the chat. But Chase and Ivan, what are your guys' thoughts on the opening up to a spiritual reality that they do?
Yeah, I definitely agree. On the echo chamber comment first, like, it's okay. We all here recognize that we are in an echo chamber. It's not a problem. Like, we're trying to find people with different opinions. But on your question, David, I think that when it comes to being open to experiences, you're opening yourself up to spiritual experiences. But in the same way that we Orthodox don't want the world to end, even though a true Christian would get to paradise afterwards, like, trying to get yourself to see every experience that you can have is kind of like a free thinker, kind of Gnostic. I'm the hero that can face every single experience that you can have. So it's basically a form of apotheosis, because you're not going to be able to handle everything that the world has got for you. So if you're already in that mindset, to me, it speaks of a lack of humility, because we actually need God to give us strength to endure the things that we don't know. And that's why we need Christ, because he's strong where we are weak. And to presuppose that we can handle any kind of like demonic influence on us is a form of spiritual pride.
Zelensky, welcome, brother. You're muted.
Hey, I'm gonna head out. Thanks for having me on. Please keep me in your prayers, guys. I've been battling food poisoning for the last 4 days. God bless. I'm gonna listen on the other end.
All right, we'll do, Chase. God bless, man. What's up, Valinsky?
Yo.
So what's your thoughts, man, on the topic?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think I'm here to break the echo chamber. But I think I have a few things to say that can add a bit of nuance. That because it's not only that it doesn't lead to enlightenment, but it is that it can lead you into the exact opposite side of where you want to end up if what you want to do is actually being enlightened. And I think that in order for me to I think it's a lot to do with the definitions of what we're talking about, right? Starting with the concept of enlightenment, right? And because it all goes back to the Garden of Eden, right? Because what was the offer of the serpent? Knowledge, right? And when we understand that, for example, one of the things, as far as I understand, that psychedelics do is that, like as you said it, David, they bring down the barriers, right? I've heard a couple of psychologists that I used to be into, forgot their names right now, but heard them say that they bring the levels between your conscious, like conscious and subconscious, they bring them down, right? So that, and for example, I used to mix these things as well with, I used to be really into I hate remembering that stuff, but I did 10 years of Buddhism, and I used to be really, really crazy with my spiritual practices and stuff like that. But I don't want to get lost in the tangent. Right. So really what it does is that the path to salvation is narrow, right? Right. And wide is the path to getting lost. I forgot the word that the Lord uses, right? So I think that when we understand that what psychedelics do is they open you up and they start allowing a free flowing of information, right?
Yeah, I agree with that. That's a great description.
It leads to a further inability to differentiate the structure of reality, right? So, which is, we can say that the structure of reality is really the Lord, the Logos, right?
Right.
So when Christ asks us or presents to us a concentric path, right? Psychedelics can take you to lead you to an eccentric, right? Lead you back to the primordial chaos of information, right? Right. Yep. So that's the thing that I wanted to say in a nutshell, is that not only it doesn't if you want, it's just all information, but inability to process it and put it into practice, right? And because the thing is also is what they were asking, does it give you a spiritual experience? And it's again to do with the definitions, right? If we're talking about an awareness of the metaphysical realities of our existence, perhaps. And I would say that instead of spiritual, because spiritual still sounds fluffy and friendly, right?
Yeah.
right? If you're a hardcore deterministic, you know, I'm also not a hypocrite. I also have some of the best times, you know, with my friends, and why not?
Yeah, some of the most ecstatic experiences, obviously, in my life, they're going to be tied back to the use of these inebriating substances, because that's what they do. They put you in a state of ecstasis.
Yeah, yeah, and so I think that yeah. So the thing is, yeah, there's so much to say, but I don't want to take all the.
Well, that I think that was great. Welcome, Clinton. Welcome, brother, to the discussion. What's your thoughts on the topic?
I'm pro psychedelics.
You're pro psychedelics? Okay, good. And so
Yeah,
you think that psychedelics lead you to enlightenment?
I think they can. I think they can definitely help.
And what would you consider? So my general objection would be, well, what is enlightenment? And so for you, how would you characterize spiritual enlightenment?
That's a tricky question. I guess if you look at different cultures, you have Buddhism, which enlightenment is, I guess, basically a state of nirvana, right? You basically reach a state of spiritual awareness where you dwell in a state of nirvana and you're in enlightenment. And basically you're just kind of meditating.
Your audio is going in and out a bit, Clinton. At times it's really clear. So I agree with you. The definition on enlightenment, if you just base it on traditions and cultures, is relative. It depends on which culture you're in. And I would say that would be then the problem. If we're going to be saying that they objectively bring you to enlightenment, there has to be an objective standard in which somebody is enlightened, or at least moving you in a general direction.
Well, I think that something like magic mushrooms, for example, really reflects the consciousness of the individual. So it really depends more on the individual than it does on any other factors. So if you look at Buddhism, they have enlightenment, and then you have Christ consciousness, or the Christian idea of enlightenment. Other religions, they have different perceptions that are basically explaining the same thing, which is spiritual enlightenment, which you might describe as God consciousness.
What would be attained in God's I'm familiar. Again, I don't subscribe. I'm an Orthodox Christian. I don't subscribe to cosmic Christ consciousness, any of that stuff. That is not consistent with my worldview. But if you were to, because I know that for psychedelic people, that's how they would describe it, because that's a different Christology. Psychedelics would consider Christ fully human. It's called Arianism, and that he's like the most enlightened entity on the planet. That's an Arian Christology. I personally don't believe that. But if you were to believe that, like, is the Enlightenment the idea that all is connected? It's unity? Do psychedelics put you into a place in which you are thinking like God? Is that what you mean by this sort of cosmic God consciousness? Do you see what I'm saying?
I think it would be more of just a connection or a reconnection, the awareness of a higher power, not necessarily.
So does your framework for enlightenment, is it related to morality?
No, not really.
So you think morality and ethics are totally relative then?
I'm not sure. I don't think that morality is really.
Hey, Clinton, I want you to keep going. We're just having trouble hearing you. Are you on headphones or on your phone, or it's just like you go out? Go ahead.
I'm on headphones. I could take them out and try my phone, see if that works better.
That might. You're super clear and we can hear you, and then all of a sudden it sounds like you're underwater, and then you come back and we can hear what you're saying. Yeah, please don't leave. You're the one. We want you to stay here. So okay, go ahead and see if we can hear you a little bit better.
Sorry, I can't hear you now.
You can't hear me?
Oh yeah.
Okay, yeah, we can hear you better now. Okay, so
Well,
we're
what
talking
I
about the
wanted to say
relativity
before
of
that was
morality.
so that as I was saying, magic mushrooms, I think, reflect the consciousness of the individual. I think that indigenous knowledge about sacred plant medicines and the existence of the sacred is extremely important here as well. And you can look at that as another form of religion if you want. Indigenous culture has often been seen as a form of paganism,
Yeah.
but indigenous people have used psychedelic plant medicines for thousands of years. So I think that that's really what Western society is missing in their study of psychedelics. Because if you look at Western society, they're studying magic mushrooms and the psychedelic experience from a limited perspective, because Western society looks at everything from a materialist, reductionist, atheistic doctrine. So I think that's really a limited way of seeing things, that a lot of academics are incapable of comprehending certain things, certain subjects, certain aspects of reality. And basically it's been driven out of them. It's been driven out of their minds, and it can't really exist to a lot of people. So that's why I think that they reflect your consciousness. So if you go into a psychedelic experience and you have a strong belief in the sacred, there's a strong possibility that you're going to have what you would describe as a sacred experience. Whereas if you get someone who is completely indoctrinated and doesn't believe in any of this stuff, and they're a materialist reductionist, then they're more likely to maybe have a bad trip or an unpleasant experience or something that's just too intense. Maybe they will have a sacred experience, but it will overwhelm them or frighten them, because they don't really know how to perceive that, because they don't really believe it. And I see a lot of people that have had psychedelic experiences and describe it as a reconnection to the sacred. So people who don't even, or didn't necessarily have a belief in the sacred, who have taken something like magic mushrooms, and then suddenly they basically experience it, and now they believe.
So in regard to, you're talking about indigenous knowledge, I'm curious, do you believe that because it's older, it's more truthful? So for example, there's plenty of tribes that have done practices for long periods of times that I would consider immoral, outside just the use of drugs or anything like that. I would consider pedophilia, for example. You can look in, anybody's familiar with Tibetan Buddhism, and you look into the rituals of the Dalai Lama and see what they're into. That's from the beginning. It has to do with sexual rituals, both with young boys and young girls. That's part of their tradition. I consider that highly immoral. And I really don't care about their cultural position, or if they were to take psychedelics and they maybe had an encounter with the mystical or spiritual. To me, again, that's not objectively true, because that transgresses my moral structure. So I'm curious for you, because it sounds like you're saying, well, it depends on who you are, and then psychedelics can or cannot give you a mystical encounter, but what you consider true or enlightenment is totally relative based on where you're coming from.
Well, I don't know about Tibetans, if I would really consider Tibetans as the type of indigenous that I was describing. I was describing like Native Americans, Australians, people who practice or followed or had the practice of shamanism. So traditional indigenous people, the Native Americans, whatever. And
well, even with those groups, I mean, they warred against each other, they raped, they pillaged. Is that good or bad? I mean, like, to me, ultimately, and that's where I don't mean to come back to the moral question and everything, but for me, that's very important, because what brought me in a new perception regards to all the psychedelics is looking for objectivity. The privileging of your own personal experience and your direct personal experience leading you towards, understanding. I think it leads people into certain delusion. What brought me out is like looking for objective structures, consistency and logic, and how does math exist, and all these things. And so I think there is a moral structure. And so whether, peyote, it's been debated if that is a How recent? I've saw some of the more recent research has suggested that maybe it goes back to 4,000 years ago, which it's very possible. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. But what does that have to do with it being true or leading one towards the objective state of spiritual betterment?
Well,
can I
spiritual.
Yeah, go ahead. Anybody, it's open.
So yeah, I think there's something, another little caveat, I think is the word that I think needs to be added. First, I want to say that interaction with metaphysical entities, I wouldn't equate that. Sorry, my Spanglish, I'm Mexican, so I'm very thick English, so I do apologize. But I wouldn't equate encountering the metaphysical realms with the sacred, right? Because the definition of sacred needs to be,
great point.
You know, also because you have girls in Burning Man calling their vagina sacred, right? So it's like it ends up meaning nothing, right? So sorry for that, but
no, it's a good point. It's a good point.
And the other thing is that I think, and I forgot to say that that not only, like, I'm not looking for enlightenment, I'm looking for salvation, right? And if you want to say, yeah, psychedelics give you information that I didn't have before, being that I grew up in a, you know, modernistic, like in a modern systematic sort of cultural context in which I was like completely, you know, square-headed, and okay, well, I'll give you that, but there's many mansions in my father's house, right? That means like a way that I understand that is like there's many dimensions in the universe that God created, and it's like, where do you want to end up, right? And it's like, where are you going? How are you, with what instruments are you gonna get to where you're going? And are you sure that where you're going is a better place that where you're at right now, spiritually speaking, you know? And so I just want to close this little comment by saying, like, it's not just about having more information or even about being a better human, because at the end of the day, I will always be a bag of organic garbage. I'm a sinner, and I'm, you know,
yeah.
So, but I just hope, my hope is the Father, my refuge is the Son, right? I protect. So like that's a whole other level, a whole other game ball when you're talking about comparing, you know, quote unquote enlightenment and all these like new age sort of practices with what Christ really offers us, you know.
Yeah, if I may interject, what we're asking basically is about the form of virtue, because like I've been where you guys have been treading, and there's this idea that you can find virtue within yourself, and that virtue, this is from Aristotle, that virtue is acting in the correct way, like for example, getting angry at the right moment with the right intensity with the right person. And let's say that psychedelics trick you into making absolute a passing emotion. So it actually blinds you. It tells you it's virtue when it's actually properly, it's more likely that it is a vice. So if you say it's sacred or it's enlightenment, maybe it's just self-worship. Maybe you're idolizing your own feeling, and you're presupposing that you have found some truth, and perhaps your feeling is maybe even appropriate at times, like, but the moment that you make it an absolute, like, are you really sure, or is it the drugs that are speaking? So why would you need to like throw yourself into psychosis to be sure of something? Could it be possible that maybe you're deluding yourself? Why wouldn't you get to that without the drugs? Why would you need the drugs in the first place?
Well, I think that's a big mistake there to refer to psychedelic plant medicines as drugs, because they're sacred. They're sacred plant medicines, and indigenous
What makes
people
them
knew and
sacred?
were aware of that. So it's not just that the plant medicines are sacred in and of themselves, but they have the potential to reconnect people to the sacred.
Why?
And
But what is
because they,
sacred, though? Do you mind defining defining the word sacred for us? That'd be good, better to understand you. Like, what do
well,
you mean by
it's the
sacred?
same concept of the divine or the holy. It's just the same
Well,
thing from different perspectives. The sacred, divine, and holy, from my point of view, are basically the same thing from different perspectives.
And by divine,
What
do you
is it?
mean?
yeah. So for Clinton, so for example, I think what they're getting at, like for me as a Christian, my God is personal. So when I think about something sacred, I'm thinking about a direct encounter with a personal God. Not saying, again, you don't have to believe anything that we're saying, but I think what they're trying to get us to understand you better. Do you mean when you talk about, say, are you encountering a higher level of consciousness? Is it an abstract understanding of divinity? Is it are you encountering entities? Is it an emotional? What exactly do you mean for something to be sacred? Because not everybody shares the same definition. So
Well,
we're just curious, what do you mean?
the underlying spiritual nature that exists behind everything.
Okay, so
The
you just mean the general, again, and that's what Valencia was saying, the general metaphysical world. You mean when you're talking about sacred, or because for that, I also believe there's negative entities. So I believe in fallen angels, for example. So I believe that you can take psychedelics and you can encounter a demon and you can potentially encounter an angel. But then what differentiates one from the other? That gets back to an objective standard. So you mean for you, sacred is just entering the realm in which any of those entities exist?
Not any necessarily. I think sacred. I refer to sacred as what you would say is good, not evil, not bad spirits, not demons, not things like that.
Well,
I think that there's
how do you know the difference? I'm just curious. What would be your how would you test to know if you're encountering a spirit, if one's good or bad?
emotional intelligence, intuition,
Okay.
just basically vibrations, I guess,
Okay.
wisdom.
Can you be deceived?
Yeah, of course, anyone can be deceived.
Agreed.
So how can you be certain then?
Well, I guess you can. And that's one thing that we need to acknowledge, that everything is really mysterious. And if you look at someone like Socrates, what did he say? That the only thing that I know is that I know nothing. I don't really
Yeah.
admire Socrates, but I think that there's a lot of wisdom in that quote, because what he was saying is basically that the deeper you delve into truth, into reality, the more knowledge you gain, the more things you learn, the more you realize that it's just a big mystery and you can't really know anything.
I
So
was thinking about Socrates today, and because I have a friend of mine who tattooed Socrates on his shoulder, and he's big into Buddhism and all those sorts of things. And I'd say that Socrates is actually telling you to think on your own. Like, that's his message. And I would say that's an inherently like spiritually destructive move, because it's telling you, like, Socrates had a daemon that he listened to, and while he was saying I don't know anything, he acted as though he did know something. And I think a lot of people like try to use that as a form of mysticism to to um to, let's say, distract us from their own Gnosticism, which is, I know because I can know in my inner self. Like, and we're asking, how can you know in your inner self? And you can be like as certain as you want about that, but at the same time, it's like it's not giving any other person any guarantees. And as a side point, I'd say that spiritual reality is not inherently sacred. Like, the sacred is something else. The spiritual realm is it's different from the sacred. God is sacred, but the spiritual realm, like, angels are not sacred. That's a difference.
Yeah,
Like
we
that.
consider angels as created entities. So that's like a different category. And this is where maybe this would be useful for the conversation. I don't know, Clint, you tell me, but at least within a Christian worldview, we believe in the noetic realm. So what Valinsky was talking about in regards to the metaphysical realm, I guess to use more theological language, would say the noetic realm, because orthodoxy teaches the place in which we encounter these non-local entities, these non-physical entities, is in the imagination. And so it puts a totally different emphasis on the imagination, where we believe the imagination is a place in which you can contact non-local entities. And this is why Orthodox Christianity typically is pretty consistent in warning people in regard to their mental images, because we believe any demonic attack, any temptation, all begins with mental images. And so this is a place in which you are sort of what we would consider accessing the noetic realm. So if that gives clarity, that we would not consider the noetic realm sacred, we would consider it a higher level of reality. But when we consider something divine or sacred, it would have to be related to the Trinity.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that, like I'd say that a lot of the let's say more philosophically inclined people that cling to figures like Socrates or Plato, they usually brush aside the mystical aspect of it, which is very related to the current cultural climate. Because like right now we have sort of a more Gnostic, more let's say esoteric, alchemical kind of thought that is trying to make below as above, you know, like to impose our own imagination on the world without first considering the possibility that our imagination of the world could be wrong. So like we're constantly trying to impose our will, like Nietzsche said, just to recreate our own inner state. And it was interesting that you mentioned, Clinton, that you needed to be in a proper place in order to like gain something from the psychedelic experience.
Which
And
I would agree with.
yeah, we would agree with that.
I
Like
agree with that.
the Orthodox, we have a very sophisticated idea anthropology, which accounts for the way our souls know God. So as David was saying, the imagination is a participatory realm where you and the spiritual entities commingle. So like demons cannot influence you unless you let them. So the imagination becomes a battleground for you to express what angels and ultimately God wants versus what demons would want you to do. And when David was trying to appeal to things like virtue or to a more concrete way of understanding the world, we'd say like virtue has a particular way in which you can discern it, which is within itself, but which transcends and moves closer to God, but not it does not dissolve itself. It does not dissolve boundaries. Rather, it erects boundaries and it defends boundaries, and it also acts as a barrier for you to be like climbing ascetically the mountain of being. So you cannot attain certain virtues if you haven't already prepared yourself spiritually for it. So I thought it was interesting that you mentioned the fact that you needed to be prepared in a way to have that experience, because I would say there's already in there let's say a seed of a notion of virtue, which is like how to best encounter the world. And I can see a lot of like let's say currents of Jungian thought going there. Like Jordan Peterson flirts with the idea of psychedelics, and there's this idea of Christ consciousness based on the idea that you can attain virtue. But from an Orthodox perspective, you cannot attain virtue unless you already cleanse your own passions. So how do you cleanse your passions would be the question.
I don't think you're really I don't think you should really try to cleanse your passions. Like you mentioned Nietzsche, and what did Nietzsche thought that the passions were something that should be embraced, not cleansed. I mean, there's different types of passions. They're not all bad. We all have a lower nature.
We're not saying that you should, let's say, like ignore the dark side of your psyche. But what we're saying is like you cannot handle everything by yourself, in the sense that if you tried to do it, it wouldn't lead you up into virtue, but rather down into multiplicity. So every single passion would be pulling for itself, and it's to become at war with yourself. That's why Nietzsche's will to power doesn't lead to a flourishing society. It leads to chaos and war. It's basically a circular it's a circular cosmology.
Yeah.
But I
Well,
feel like Clinton, I don't want to be like rude or anything, but you haven't defined your worldview very well. I feel like, because the thing is, for you, in order for you to make the claim that, yeah, you gain enlightenment from this, I would expect you to have a very well defined concept of enlightenment, and I'm unless I'm not paying attention, which could be the case. I haven't heard you give a solid definition or an argument for what you're standing for.
Yeah. For example, what is God for you, Clinton? Or do you believe in God? Like Nietzsche, for example, I'm very familiar with his philosophy. He was a nominalist, so he did not believe in objective morality or objective truth. He only believed in power, which is part of the postmodern turn in philosophy, where we see somebody like Michel Foucault, where he only believed that the only thing that actually exists is power. This is where you can use Marxist dialectics to analyze the world, because everything then is about power dynamics. I'm curious, do you use, because you mentioned you don't really focus on morality in your worldview, what is God? Or because it sounds like maybe you have a monistic, maybe a pantheistic or panentheist. I'm curious. I want you to define. I don't want to put any words or descriptions on top of you. How would what is God for you? Or is
well,
there one?
it's really a mystery. It's something that I don't think any of us can comprehend. And I've studied indigenous culture, the practice of shamanism. I've studied Christianity. I've studied Buddhism. So I've studied all of these religions, and
Same.
I feel like they're all just describing the same thing from different perspectives.
Well,
But
well, Buddhism and Christianity are totally two opposing worldviews in regards to the person. So one's about the person is an illusion and you have no soul. It's an Anatman. The other one's claiming that you are a soul and the whole thing is to purify it to reach the kingdom. Those are totally two different worldviews.
And I studied Toltec philosophy and shamanism. That was instead of the Bible. One of my uncles gave me a Toltec book, and you basically are trained to do magic and wizardry, and that opposes the Bible. In the commandments of not, this is, what do they call it? Yeah. So
you're a perennialist? You think all religions lead to the same mountaintop?
no, I think that it's important to study all religions, though. I think that it's important to keep an open mind. And if you look at indigenous culture, indigenous people had wisdom. They were the last race of human beings who were still ruled by wisdom, and that's because they were philosophers. So they acknowledged the mystery.
So
they kept open minds, and they were philosophers, really.
Well, okay, when you claim that tribal shamanic traditions are philosophers, I'd have to beg to disagree there in regards to like what consistent logical system are they perpetuating?
Well, I'm not saying that the shamans were philosophers. I'm saying that indigenous culture was centered around philosophy, and that's why they have and had wisdom.
Ours
is wisdom purely is wisdom purely a subjective experience with it, or is it a something objective?
I think wisdom is a type of spiritual knowledge.
Okay, so what is knowledge different than wisdom then?
Yeah.
Okay. But wisdom is defined by spiritual knowledge.
I think wisdom is something spiritual, that wisdom comes from beyond this physical realm.
And wisdom has nothing to do with morality or in ethics?
It does, I think.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. It does or doesn't?
Yeah, it does. Okay,
so what is that moral structure? Because not all tribes, not all indigenous people had the same moral understanding. Not all
No.
cultures have the same moral understanding. So which one's right? So generally speaking, all worldviews, all paradigms have a metaphysics, an ethics, and an epistemology, and that's just a way to try to figure out what worldview you're in. And that's what I was trying to get you to answer what you believe to be God is, because that would then help me understand if you're in a pantheistic or a panentheistic or a deistic worldview, what exactly your worldview was.
Do I have to be one of those?
Everybody's one of those. If you reject objective truth, you're already in one that is relativistic. You can't make a truth statement.
Can you not be multiple?
No, because it's contradictory. So, for example, you can't say there is no objective truth because you're making a truth statement that there's no truth. That's a contradiction.
Well, everyone's truth is relative to their own level of consciousness.
So 2 + 2 doesn't always equal 4 then? Is that true?
It's not true.
It's
So
not
I
true.
guess 2 + 2 = 4 is a universal truth.
Yep.
But people out there can believe that 2 + 2 = 5.
But that's not true. So they can think what they want, but that doesn't mean it's true.
So
So
that's
that's why I
delusion.
disagree with the idea that everybody has their own truth. I would never use that language myself, because I don't think if somebody thought 2 + 2 = 5, they can think a man can think he's a woman doesn't make he is one.
No, but everyone's truth is different. So your truth is basically based on your own personal experience, right? So we can have different levels of truth.
We would disagree, I think, because
Yeah.
even if it's truth, then you share it.
I mean, some people hate getting wet in the rain. Some people like dancing in it, but it's still H2O, right? Like you have your own subjective perception of truth, but the truth is still the truth, right? Is that what you mean? That everybody can interpret, perceive truth in the way they want? Clinton?
I'm a little flabbergasted here, to be honest. I thought we were going to talk about psychedelics, magic mushrooms. And
Well, we are, because it comes to the objective statement of enlightenment, and we're making truth claims. So if you believe everybody has equal access to truth, or you believe in a relativism, an epistemic relativism, well, then you can't actually say anything is true because you're claiming that there is no objective truth. I don't think that's what you believe, but then when you're talking about everybody having their own truth, that's going to be tied to the psychedelic experience and the validity of that experience in its relationship to spiritual enlightenment. So I think we're still on the same topic, but I think we're just trying to understand how exactly you can make an objective claim about something, whether it is good or bad, whether it is true or false.
well, it's difficult to explain. I think that everything is basically a mystery. And someone like Nietzsche, what did he say about truth? That
Yeah, he didn't believe in
the level of truth that you're able to handle determines how strong you are, or something like that.
Well, he didn't believe in a universal truth. So even his statements, if you're consistent with reading Nietzsche, Nietzsche is using language to just point you towards the acquisition of your own power. It's not about it necessarily being true. You know, I've done debates with Nietzscheans, and that, you know, if you're a consistent Nietzschean, you can't claim any moral claim or truth epistemic claim, because the whole point is that all that stuff isn't real, and therefore you need to assert your power through the Ubermensch, through various, you know, developments of oneself, through artistic expression. And this is why you consider Christianity a slave morality, because it's so focused on objective moral truths. Nietzsche rejected those. And I'm not here to tell you not to be a Nietzschean. I mean, you can be whatever you want, but I'm saying Nietzsche doesn't, his Nietzschean philosophy doesn't allow for the existence of objective truth. He denies all that stuff.
Yeah, and when we're asking for let's say a grounding or a justification for it, like it's because we have the presupposition, and we own it, that it's contradictory to say that you can have like your own personal truth without a universal truth.
Yeah, because what's it tied to?
Well, if you look at what's unfolding in the world today, is not almost all of humanity delusional?
I would agree. However, maybe what we consider delusion might differ. So I agree. I think there's a massive propaganda that way. I think 2020 was indicative of how many people buy into the propaganda, and it's tied to institutional narratives, mainstream media, the movement towards a one world government, all these sort of things, the Great Reset. I believe a lot of people are under delusion, but that then requires me to know what is not delusion, making an objective statement about that.
Doesn't the delusion arise partly from the fact that everyone seems to have their own version of truth? It's not objective anymore. It's a subjective feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. So would not self-knowledge be extremely important here, because people are prone to self-deception? They're prone to lie to themselves?
It seems that self-knowledge has reached its zenith in terms of everything becomes self-reflective instead of looking outside oneself for something greater.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was going to say, in regards to self-knowledge, I mean, we just saw what's the Chris dude who worked for Mr. Beast, man, married, had a son, decides that his truth is that he's actually a woman and breaks away from his family. His son now has no father, and he's taking hormones to become a woman. Is that true?
That's delusion.
Well, how do we know the difference? He says that's his truth.
But he's delusional.
I agree, but my point is that's why we have to have objective epistemic standards.
Because that's a form of mental illness. That's because he's disconnected from reality, basically. He doesn't have self-knowledge. If he had self-knowledge, he would see that he's lying to himself, that he's fooling himself, that he's basically mentally ill.
But couldn't you also say he is self-aware, and he thinks that he's self-aware and that he has self-knowledge because he's going after his truth, which is to be a woman?
Yeah, and then the indigenous people believe in the two-spirited tradition where men can have two sex and stuff like that.
That's true.
So
DPH was talking earlier about, the Enlightenment, and I think that this seems to be. This is an example of where Enlightenment thinking is, again, like reached its apotheosis during our era, right? It's like absolute freedom. What does freedom mean? That people want to they want no limits, no rules, right? No law. And they want the freedom to do anything, which always ends up being these like extreme depraved examples, like the guy who turned into a dog this week. I mean, I know that's
I saw that, bro. Was that in London or something?
Yeah, he wants to be Lassie, This poor fella. I know that's
so. Yeah. So Clinton and I think we all agree. I think all of us would be of the same opinion then in regards that these people are in delusion. I think we're all on the same page. We're with you, bro.
Okay, so where does that delusion come from? How can people become that disconnected from reality?
Right.
We believe that there's a sin that Adam introduced into the world that darkened our news, our mind, our ability to see the world as it truly is. And this is sort of a social disease. So postmodernism is, if you take postmodernism to its ultimate conclusion, then the person that believes he's a dog or a man that thinks he's a woman, they're completely correct. Like what we were asking for is an objective standard. Umberto Eco, who is like an Italian semiotician, or used to be because he's dead now, he said that the true expression of a liberal is to be against all truth, because in order to safeguard people's individual ability to determine themselves, you would have to go against universal truth. And he was right. The problem was that he believed that there was no truth.
Right.
And we're living in the aftermath of those kinds of revolutions. So when we ask you for grounding, a justification for you're saying that they're mentally ill, like you have to actually come up with an answer, because if not, the postmoderns are actually correct.
And here, Clinton, let me explain how you could answer and not adopt our worldview. Obviously, I'm Orthodox Christian. I'd imagine most of us on here are Christian, but you could say, as a psychedelic person, you say, you know what? Logic and mathematics and language is metaphysically rooted in the cosmic mind. You could believe in a sort of panpsychism. Now there's a metaphysical rooting for non-physical things. And now you can say, okay, the person who thinks he's a woman and he's biologically a man, he's in delusion because he's not consistent with the categories that the divine cosmos or divine consciousness or whatever created. Now, at least now you've given a justification for how something exists, because what they're trying to highlight is, like with the postmodern turn, for example, which the French intellectuals and the academy generally speaking now believes in, that there is no universal truth. The only thing that is real is power and then individual self-expression. So therefore, if you want to be a dog as that dude in London, or you want to be a woman, or you want to identify as black, like wasn't that white woman, she like got her hair curled and her skin darkened and she identifies as black now, she's transracial. Like we would argue that God created the world and that there are these objective categories like male, female, and that the fact that somebody was so deluded to believe the opposite is indicative of their rejection of and turning away from that reality, that real objective order that God established.
I agree that there's male and there's female, but I want to be a female dog.
Hey, CBH, can I ask you something quick?
Yeah, your audio is really bad, Joe, but go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. There might be a lot of background noise. I'm driving. I hope you can.
You're going in and out. It's really hard to hear.
I think psychedelics affect. Ah, shoot. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Partly. Keep going. We'll see if we can understand the whole question. Yeah, just continue with the question. We'll see if we can understand.
How do you think psychedelics affect? How do you think psychedelics affect this?
Finish the question, man.
For someone who's not like proper.
Hey Joe, I'm sorry, bro. All we can hear is you keep saying psychedelics, and then it breaks up. You're muted. Oh, now he backed out. Maybe he'll call back. Hopefully he'll call back. But okay, so to turn it back more onto the psychedelics, Clinton, because I think we're getting into the objective standards for statements. What for you, for example, what is God? You said it's hard to know. What would be, when you are spiritual, what activities do you do? Do you pray? Do you meditate? Is God an abstract entity? Is he a person, or is it a her? I mean, is it Gaia? What for you, what is God? Clinton, you're muted. I don't know if you're still there. Okay.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I think that God is a great mystery, and we can't really know. We can try to know, we can try to comprehend, but I don't think we can ever truly understand. I think we can have a relationship with a higher power, but to know for sure and be able to say that this is God, I think that's something that you can't really do. I think it's a great mystery.
That's kind of the point, because if we cannot know the mystery, then we cannot have any kind of knowledge.
Right.
We would definitely agree that there's a mysterious aspect of God, and Orthodox theology is very different from the theology of the West, in the sense that we kept the space for the mysterious in God with the essence energy distinction, which is something very interesting if you haven't heard of it before. It basically allows God to become immanent and present and knowable within this realm, but it doesn't make you privy into the internal unknowable aspect of God. So it would be a way to know God and to walk with God, to actually live out. Well, he left anyway. I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's all good. It's all good. Well, Clinton, anyways, if you're still listening, brother, thanks for joining. We appreciate you. Baze, what's your experience with inebriating substances?
Well, you guys were talking about wisdom earlier, and I know that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom.
Hey, Baze.
Is that me?
Yeah, you have the computer on? I'm hearing myself in your background. Oh, here's Clinton. He's back.
Sorry, that's a problem.
You're all right, bro. You're all right. BLA was getting ready. Can you?
Yeah, that echo's not me.
Yeah, that's not you.
Yeah. Well, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And I feel like one thing about this conversation, it's ironic because these are the types of conversations that people have when they're on psychedelics, but it just doesn't get, I think that, but it stops at a certain level, because I think what this kind of boils down to, from my own experience and, the people that I know, is that everyone, essentially, a lot of people that use psychedelics, they do this, especially when they're younger, because when they get past the, we're going to Fish 98, man, it's going to be cool. When they get past that, it's because they want to experience the unknown and something outside themselves. And they want this sort of knowledge, which when you're older, you learn is a kind of, entryway into Gnosticism, right? Or because essentially they want to be loved. And I think that that's one of the things about psychedelics, is that, people are yearning for like a feeling of warmth and coziness and the sublime and bliss. And that it's just a feeling. It's a temporary feeling where, all right, so I have an experience. I have a wealth of experience with this. That's all I'm going to say. But
for legal purposes, allegedly have a wealth of experience.
Allegedly, from my youth. But I can't believe nobody in here has brought up the Grateful Dead, man. We're talking about psychedelics. Nobody's brought up Jerry.
Yeah. I've never been to I never went to a Deadhead concert.
Why are they called Grateful Dead, man? Why are they grateful? No, but look, I had an experience. It was the last time that I used psychedelics. I would never do that now. It's been 20 years, and that one time was the bad trip of all bad trips. And you know it. If you've had a bad trip, you know that there's no like either or. And
right.
I'll just say that mine was so bad, it really affected me. And I think that. I don't think that when people use psychedelics, they're necessarily, opening up their soul to entities, every time. I think that it comes to a point, though, where that is not only possible, but begins to happen. And for me, there was one instance when I was in my freshman year of college, and I was with my friends, I was my best friends. And I saw something, and this is I'm not going to say what I saw, but it's a common experience with people who've had this kind of bad trip. And it really it scared me. And I looked at my best friend and I didn't say anything. And he turned to me and he said, "You saw him, didn't you?" And that really shook me. And when I got back to the dorm after the break, a couple weeks later, one of the guys on the hall talked about he had a bad trip, and he said he was this is kind of gnarly, but he said he was throwing up. He'd taken peyote, and he was throwing up into the toilet, and he saw the devil looking at him. And I couldn't believe that these things occurred so close to each other. And I think that I say that's the bad trip of all bad trips, because that is that's the danger of this stuff. And anyone who's like had, it's not, I was worried that something would happen, but when that happened to me, it really, it shocked me and it changed me. And I basically prayed for the 9 hours that I had left of this awful trip. That's all I did. And I just prayed that I would come out the other side. And I did. And but I think that I don't know. That's sort of I think you mentioned earlier that a lot of people that continue to do this, like when they get older through experience, they fall into addiction. You never see 45-year-olds who are, using habitual psychedelics, unless it's like because they're following a band or they're in some sort of therapy or they are addicted to narcotics in addition to that. So again, they're searching for some sort of warmth, a false, they want love, I think is what it boils down to. And that's sad because I think a lot of people who do this, they don't want to confront the fact that they want God. They want to they want to destroy the hubris that they have and humble themselves before God. I think that that's a big thing in the world we live in. Sorry to be so dark here with this stuff, but I mean that's the reality of this,
No, I thought it was quite of a jovial enlightenment with your story. So it may have been dark, but I think it's common for a lot of people. Again, that accessing, like seeing shared experience with entities. And I would also agree that when you take LSD, psilocybin, ayahuasca, MDMA, even, like the casuistry of the world changes. McKenna used to talk about this, but it was totally factual with my own experience. Like the wildest shit would happen. I'm talking about animals, people, like the most outrageous, unlikely thing, like is right there in front of you happening. And you're like, what? Like you can't, it's hard to distinguish, like if it's the trip, if it's real. And it is strange how these substances seem to affect your experience of like causality and space and time. Like things shift, something's weird there. But I had multiple experiences where I was absolutely convinced something was about to happen. So I got loaded. This happened to me on LSD and also on DMT. I had a DMT experience where I was totally convinced when I came down, something in my life was getting ready to happen. It had to do with like school and getting into a particular school. And I was sure of it. I mean, it was the experience told me it was going to happen. And then it didn't happen. And this happened to me a few different times where it really shook this idea that these experiences we have in these noetic realms on psychedelics are like objectively real and going to come to fruition in reality. I was convinced of it. The experience was absolutely real, but it didn't come to fruition in reality. And it really put a sort of, certainly began me on a trajectory where I started to question the validity of all these different things.
Yeah. Go ahead, Base.
I'll just say that I have a friend when we were 20. He dropped acid and went to the park. And he said that when he was there was an ice cream man, a Jamaican ice cream man, who, when he ordered some ice cream, he turned to him and his eyes were red. And he said, he said his name. And he said, "I'll see you in 3 days. Everybody want heaven, don't want to get there." And he asked me, who is this guy? And I jokingly, I was like, that was Papa Legba. And thankfully, it turned out that he was like the lawnmower man at the guy's house. He just didn't recognize him because he was on acid. Now that's a jovial experience. But you were talking about the things that you see and experience, and I think that when you're a teenager and you do this kind of stuff, it's interesting, and you're with your friends and all this stuff happens. And, you get new insights into music and all that stuff.
Right.
But I think that the unexpected events that happen and the unexpected, you always experience you think it's going to be like, oh man, I'm going to see trails and hallucinations and visions. But when those really happen, it's usually not good. Especially if you see like shapes of people, right, or faces. That is, I can't think of an experience where that wouldn't be terrifying. And what I saw when I saw this, I remember thinking that I was like, please be Saint Michael, please. I was thinking, please let this be Saint Michael. And I knew it wasn't. But I also knew that, that God loves me, and that this was in His providence, and I had to get through it, and I had to pray. And one last thing I'll say.
Yeah, go ahead, man. Go ahead.
The thing about they always use, like with MK Ultra, is and acid, and the origins of this stuff is, Frank, what's his name? The guy who Fort Detrick, Wormwood. Yeah, he took too much acid, and then he jumped out the window, man.
That's what we're told. Yeah.
Yeah, but the reality is that Sidney Gottlieb did this to him after there was bacteriological warfare, human experimentation, and they threw him out the window. And so, the thing is, like they always say that this can be very dangerous for those reasons, and it almost never is in terms of that stuff. But I did lose it. I had a very good friend when I was younger, and this did break him. And he lost his mind. He went crazy, and he did acid every single day. He'd been doing it for years, and then he hitchhiked, and then he got to Hawaii, shaved his head. He was taking peyote and acid. I think he was on everything really. And he came back home, and a terrible event happened, and he's dead. And I think that I hate to, I'm sharing something like deeply personal with you guys, but I think that for me, that when people talk about the dangers of this stuff, that's it. That's what that means to me. And a lot of people don't want to confront the fact that they see a spiritual, or a metaphysical universe. It's just like we're all one, man. But they don't want to define it. But I think that exists, and it can be very dangerous, or it can be something that drives you to seek God.
Right. Yeah. I knew of a person in high school that they had a terrible traumatic experience on psychedelics. Meanwhile, I was deep into it, so I was very pro for it at this point, and they were never the same. They were never the same person. And I don't know the details of their experience, but it can happen. There can be these psychotic breaks. Another point that I wanted to mention is there's a popular a psychedelic YouTube channel called Your Mate Tom. I did an interview with him over on my Church on Material Logos channel, and he talked about he was very resistant and reluctant to the whole Christian thing. Christians are dumb, backwards people, don't really know what's going on. And he was really into the shamanic and ayahuasca ceremonies, but he went to Peru. He was all about going to Peru for his ceremonies. And he told me, at least, I don't know if he's gone again, but the last time that he went, he told me that he went and the shaman was sort of sexually assaulting some of the women there that once they were all loaded on ayahuasca. And he said that he felt so uncomfortable, and it started to grow, and he started to see that where he was totally loaded on ayahuasca, and that the shaman was evil and what he was doing. And he said he started to feel like he was getting attacked by these spirits, and the only thing that helped was when he called out to Jesus Christ, which he was a non-believer. And he said that's like they started to go away, and that's what put him on a journey of starting to look into Christianity at some point, because you can look online of all these testimonies of people that said they get into these altered states, and when they do get in dark places, the only thing that can stop an entity, or for people's phenomenological experience, I'm not telling you what objectively happened, I don't know, but their experience, the way they recount it, is that calling out to Christ was the only thing that stopped these entities from taking control of them.
Yeah. And I think this is if Clinton, are you there, bro?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, I think just to drive at least a message home, the message home is, by your own words, you like I can, from my perspective, I can give you the psychedelics can open you up to metaphysical realities and spaces for sure. But by your own words, you have said that you don't know how to know whether an entity is good or bad, right? So, right, and also by your words, you all constantly define this space as a big mystery, right? Because I feel like we're at least I'm not being fair. I'm not being like I think I could be a little more empathetic or sympathetic with Clinton in acknowledging the fact that when you've been scrapping the garbage cans for all your life and somebody gives you a hot dog, you want to kiss their hands, and the hot dog is definitely more nutritious than whatever garbage you manage to get, right? But it's still, by our standards, it's still fast trash food, right? So when we come from a background of like inheriting all the garbage of the, since the Renaissance and then the Industrial Revolution and postmodernism, and this is the highest you can aim at, is a career path that will end up when you are not able to keep working, and then you will just sit back and dwell in perpetual nostalgia until you die and you encounter the real sacred and you wonder how you waste. You know what I mean? Like when you come from that, of course you drop an acid and you're gonna feel like this is it, because in comparison to where we're at, this is it. But before we decided to be purely reductionistic in Western society, before that, we had a more holistic understanding of what the human experience is, which involved this space, which for the acid dropper might be something new, but for the people of ancient people was nothing new. And it was nothing new, and that reality, and because the only thing you can control is how much acid you can take in order for you to encounter those entities, but you cannot control those entities, and you cannot control the space in which you are now navigating after you are engaging in such practices, right? You don't have the necessary instruments to navigate that space in this life and beyond, right? So people of the past, before we were indoctrinated into mindless reductionism, right, knew that, and that's what led them to God, right? That's what I'm trying to tell you is, by your own definitions, you don't know, you don't have full understanding, and you don't think you will ever have full understanding of this space in which you're at, and you don't know which entities are good or bad. So what I want to tell you is, this is the reason why you need Jesus Christ. I mean, I know to be an evangelist, a Protestant sort of like, but that's just the fact, brother.
Good point,
right?
sir. I'm going to break in real quick, and I'll say that one interesting thing is that when angels appear, right, they identify themselves. They say, "I'm not God."
Right.
Right. And these pagan entities, in pagan mythology or demons, it's always a trick. It's always like, oh, there's a secret here, and you got to figure out, do you want to be part of this secret club? Because humans like have this thing about they want to be part of something that nobody else knows about, right? They want to be in this club, or and that's all in the shadows, and God says who he is, right? The angels always say who they are. There's no the mystery, right, is in the awesomeness. It's not in like, oh, you gotta get through the labyrinth and then you'll be part of this club, man. Which is essentially like what the culture of, it's taking psychedelics is. It's like the secret thing. I mean, that's what buying drugs is, being into like all this stuff. I'm not saying like, you go to a Fish concert, it's not, that's not bad in itself. That's fun. But going there and like walking through the parking lot, and finding the guy who's, selling opium or whatever, who's, this guy's not an undercover cop. This guy's not a Fed, but we're going to be part of the secret thing, man. That's all part of this, right? And the liberation is in getting on your knees before God and, realize, or in the ritual of the Eucharist. I mean, that's the thing. It's not the taking mushrooms and the, I'm gonna. There's space aliens, man, and we're all one.
Yeah, and you can also bring it like on your own life. Like you can live in a Christian way. You cannot live in a psychedelic way. You cannot be drugged up all your life. Like you can like take communion, and if you receive it properly, if you're living a Christian life, it will manifest in your actions, in the way you love other people. So I have a positive story about drugs. I took Molly with this group of friends, and we were at a club. And in Argentina, we it's very common that people will like steal your cell phone or something. And a friend of mine lost their cell phone. And since the crowd was so drugged up, like somebody came and gave my friend his cell phone, like because we were in such a loving ecstasy that like that was the spirit of the moment. It was an emotional thing. And I'd say at that moment, I thought, what if we could live like this all the time? What if this was the proper way of living life? But the problem is that afterwards you come down from the drug and it's over. And probably you're not as loving as you were.
Yeah.
But with Christianity, this does happen. And I can see it whenever I go to my church, I see it. I see the love that other people have. And drugs are a two-way mirror. So you have to weigh in the risks, because perhaps you become more empathetic. Let's say Molly gives you a very keen sense of where everybody's at, like emotionally, what they want. You can sense from the way they're looking at things what their intentions are. But that's also very dangerous. And also when you do psychedelics,
music, that back rub you realized you got from Kai at the rave was a lot worse. You thought he was a fluffy bear at the time. It turned out he was something totally different. He was the bear in The Shining. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I mean, you're exactly right. And it's a two-way mirror, but it's they're also chains. They're chains with hooks on them, and the brief moment of the ecstatic sublime that you get is all temporal, and you think it like people think it cures their soul, but any addict will tell you that it's hellish.
Yeah, and the reason is that you're clinging, like in Christianity, we have this image of like, there's a reason why we eat God's flesh, because if you eat dead flesh, it will not give you life. Like if you're eating from your brother, like if you're so empathetic that you cannot have your own identity, if you're so attuned to the other person, you're gonna get lost in their own craziness. So there's a point where like these drugs open you to other realities that are self-destructing. So when we speak about demons, what we're talking about is patterns of being that do not lead you to the truth. So they present themselves as being the truth, but there's something hidden there that you don't want it to be there.
Right.
And like at first, go ahead, David.
Well, I was gonna say something, and then I wanted Clinton to come in because he hadn't spoke. But that's why, as Christians, we would see demonic possession. So we talking about these patterns of being. Maybe you encounter them in altered states, but somebody who's a pedophile, various aberrant forms of sexuality, we would say any total immersion into a temptation, because it's not like somebody who's practicing a homosexual lifestyle, they're evil. It'd just be like somebody else who had a drug addict in a different way. We all have different temptations, but there's an objective standard for what's right and wrong. And those that continue to dive deeper or participate in those, we believe it separates your noetic faculties from that which cleanses it. And that's why we would say you're demonically possessed. It could be at a very minuscule level. It doesn't mean like they're not a person or they're not, your buddy Chris. It could be, but they're diving deeper into something that is possessing them, and they're becoming out of control with their own life. But Clinton, I want you to go wherever you want based on everything that's been said. What's kind of your response and thoughts on everything?
I think we need to differentiate between drugs and plant medicines. So magic mushrooms can heal you. They can get you off of things like alcohol, tobacco, pharmaceutical drugs, things that will kill you, things that kill people every day.
Mm-hmm.
But sacred plant medicines can heal you. They can help you get off of addictions. They can help with mental health issues, addiction, depression, anxiety, PTSD, suicidal thoughts. They can help you heal from trauma. So
can they also can they take
difference.
Can they take you in the opposite direction? Because again, my point is, it doesn't matter what you call a plant medicine. It doesn't matter if it's peyote, psilocybin, ayahuasca, ibogaine, even though that's a totally different experience. But
coca flower,
coca flower, any of this stuff, you can call them sacred plants or medicines or medicinal helpers. But my point is, you can take 5 dried grams of mushrooms and become more diluted by the time you come out of it.
Yeah, well,
you may think you're being healed, but what's healing you? I believe only God can heal you. So I personally do not believe plants heal you in a certain way. I think the dissolving properties of the boundaries can aid in regards to the overcoming of traumas. And if that's something you're struggling with, maybe, okay, you could say that you're being healed in that way. I know ibogaine is one of the most effective ones for opioid addiction. LSD was very successful with alcoholism. This was a trial that Timothy Leary did. So I don't disagree with what you're saying, Clinton, that they can help with certain things. But when the category of that these are medicinal plants that help you, my point is what they help you with is something so small that they open you up to something that's way larger. And most people I've seen that continue in that practice over and over and over and over again, they live lives that I don't want to imitate at all.
Yeah.
Just real quick. I think it's also, if you want to see them as medicinal, we need to also say that you stop taking medicine when you're not sick anymore, right? But and also you have to, what is the sickness you are trying to heal?
But they're also more than a medicine, because once you heal yourself, you can use them as an enhancer. They can enhance your mind as well.
Give me an example.
Well, Silicon Valley, there's a lot of people who deal with technology who microdose to give them an edge to enhance their mind.
Yeah, and I think they're participating in the demise of humanity. They're building our own jail cell through technology.
But you can increase your focus to do other things. I'm just using that as an example.
I can smoke meth, and that'll help me with my focus.
I can interject. If I can interject, I would say that the word pharmakon from Greek means both medicine and poison. So I would say that yes, poison in the right dose might, in the right context, give you exactly what you need, but you need a standard for that. And like when we Orthodox Christians worship, when we venerate icons, we're worshiping God, but we don't think that God is the icon. We don't think that the technical aspect is equal to what heals us. Let's say it's not the medicine itself that heals you. It's the physician. So if you think that you can reduce everything to technology, if you think that you can reduce everything to the technical aspects of reality, then you're already trapped within the matrix from our perspective, because it's not the drug itself. It's the spiritual enlightenment that we've been trying to talk about right now. So if the drug can lead you to enlightenment, or it can lead you to destruction, then it's not the drug itself, or it's not the medicinal plant, or however you want to call it. And I would suggest that you look at, for example, the work that Jonathan Peugeot has done to parse out the role of, for example, art in life, because in his conception of reality, art and what we do, work, everything is something of an expression that we can give back to participate, but it's not the be all end all. What's important is the spirit that is behind it. So if I cut you up because I'm a surgeon and I want to heal you, it's very different than if I want to cut you up because I want to kill you. Technically speaking, you can apply the same technique to kill or to save, but it's not in the technique, but rather in the spirit that works behind it.
God created the poppy flower. And, you know, if you get your leg blown off in a war and you're in severe pain, then the poppy is good for you, right? It can help you, you know, it takes away the pain and it can help you while your body heals. But it is not sacred. It doesn't heal your soul. And I think that, you know, people think this way with all drugs. You know, they think that this is the key to unlock the labyrinth. And it's not. It just feels good, but
Right.
it's not the key. You know, I mean, people have this problem with the oppression of Christianity, right? The oppression, and you know, Christ said, blessed are the children, right? Blessed are the meek. He hangs out with prostitutes and heals a leper, and the only guy that's promised heaven is the thief on the cross, right? This low guy.
Right.
He's low. He's the lowest. That's the key. That's the hospital of the soul. That's healing your soul. That's salvation.
Yeah, Orthodoxy speaks about how the thief on the cross to the right of Christ is the first one into the kingdom because in his heart he fully recognized God. And that's then all of our journeys, even in the psychedelic space, it's our heart moving through and finally encountering God. That's how we get into the kingdom. But that's where then it gets into these objective standards on how do we come to know who God is when we move through these spaces. That's an important epistemic question.
Hello, everyone.
Oh,
hi, Ginger. What's up?
Nothing. Just thought that I'll hop on and maybe
Feel
chat with
free.
you
What's
guys.
your opinion on this? What's your thoughts on do psychedelics lead to enlightenment?
I've never tried them, but
well,
you have to, man. They're far out. They're far out.
yeah, I don't see how. I think people just bug out. I don't think it leads to anything but, you know,
okay,
it's that crazy shit.
Well, Clinton, you were getting ready to say something earlier. I wanted before you fell out. I don't know if it was your connection or something. What were you saying, brother?
No, I can't remember now.
Okay,
but
yeah, go ahead.
So I think that indigenous knowledge about these plant medicines is really what's missing, because when you look at Western society, they have been disconnected from the sacred. That's what the very process of being colonized or civilized is. So if you look at Zelensky, for example, he said that he's Mexican, but being Mexican is not a real identity. Being Mexican is a nationality, and that was created and is fictional. So the truth is that Zelensky is actually an indigenous person, what you might call a Native American. So
Can I interject, since we're talking about my identity?
Yeah.
But stay with me. Don't let me talk too much, because I get excited. But then it's like, what is a cultural identity? You know, is the result of a historical process of human development. You know, and I could say the same thing about being an indigenous person, right? Because, you know, for example, the Aztecs, when Spanish people got to Mexico, you know, they it's I don't see how it relates to the validity of the medicinal plants or not. That's what I'm saying.
Well,
Well,
I just
the Aztecs were a stunning and brave culture, and they were on the ziggurats and they were chopping off heads, and that was indigenous. But
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say is that they were coming from somewhere else. They were following a symbol. They were not Mexicas to begin with. So that was an identity that had to develop, like just like Mexican, just like whatever it follows. Like cultural identities just serve for the purpose of, of conversation and for the process of, a more efficient historical understanding of where we're standing. But
What is
I'm
your
not very.
nationality?
well, the Aztecs built pyramids too. I think that's pretty damn impressive.
They
that is impressive. Yeah,
they found them. They found the majority of them there already from.
No,
from
they built them.
Yeah, I know. They built some. They built some. But what I'm saying is, how does that add to the validity of the medicinal plants, or because I feel like, okay, I give you that psychedelics help you see through the modernist bullshit. I give you that in a reasonable amount, you can help get perspective on your emotional aches, so that you can get to a place where you can heal. But I wouldn't say heal, because healing for me implies a correction of sorts, and for me correction means going back to the original point of perfection or of correction, you know what I mean, or when the thing was right. And
Yeah,
for me that can
like what Ivan said about Adam sinning and then falling into a fallen state where he can't see anymore.
and that's what I'm saying, like that only Christ can give you that correction. Medicine can only help you ease the pain, or just distract you from it, but in terms of like full healing of your soul and emotions, that's what I'm not following, and I don't know how the colonial idea helps to build that argument.
What psychedelic dinosaurs though?
What psychedelics do you guys use? Because I microdosed with mushrooms for a month straight, probably like 7-8 years ago. Have you guys ever done anything like that?
Are you wearing a yarmulke?
Yes, actually, after I microdosed for a month, that's when I found my one true God, the Jewish
I'm
God.
sorry, that's cultural appropriation, and I find that awfully triggering. Oh my god! No, I'm just kidding, bro. That's dope.
Oh, so, Eric, nice guy Eric Fitz. I take it that you're in support. You think psychedelics lead you to enlightenment?
Yes, of course they do, because
And
not only years later, after converting to Judaism, I actually, if you notice the other hat I'm wearing, I also came out as my true sexuality, gay.
So you're gay and Jewish?
Well, it is all.
Yes,
it's all consistent.
That's like okay.
Yeah, I don't believe that could
tracks.
happen. I used to be gay, and then I went to church, and I think church helped me, not drugs.
See, the
personally.
church turned me gay. It was the opposite.
Yeah. Well, nice guy
You
Eric.
mean
It feels a bit
synagogue?
like you're trolling, bub. It's hard to take you serious.
I would never do that. It says "nice guy" in my name.
That's true. It does. That is a factual statement, though. It feels more like a troll than a serious engagement with.
So, have you guys ever done acid? Since you guys are talking about psychedelics,
Yeah.
Yeah, bro.
Yeah, many times.
dude, you ever done acid and listened to Alex Jones? That shit's wild.
That is wild. I will say that is a good point.
I just want to say goodbye, everybody. Thank you for having me. David.
Thank you, Valinsky. Thanks for hopping on, brother. I appreciate it. Thanks for your words of wisdom. God bless you, man.
My pleasure.
Hey, Ray, what's up, man? Are you what's your position? For or against?
What?
I can't hear you.
What?
On the topic for the open panel, are you for? Do you believe psychedelics take you towards enlightenment or no?
I'm pro psychedelics. I don't care where they take you. It's always fun.
Okay, so that then has nothing to do with spiritual advancement, correct?
I doubt it.
I don't really know if you could call it advancement, because
Yeah,
what I
you may
learned
see some
doing a
shit.
bunch of psychedelics when I was doing that, I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment. So what I realized is, there's all
really
these
small.
other people in apartments near me, and we're just all living in small boxes, and we don't mean shit. So you got to try to mean
True.
something.
Yeah, that's okay. So having a nihilistic worldview, and I mean that's a whole nother bag of worms in regards to
Nihilistic? Okay, wait a minute. Is it nihilistic or nihilistic?
it's two different ways to pronounce the same word.
Okay.
I mean,
So
I didn't know.
I want to get to Ray's opinion. So
Yeah. Oh no.
So what is God for you?
The kid version. He's the big guy upstairs. Takes care of everything.
Okay. Is it a personal God or is it an abstraction like consciousness or something?
That's a good question.
Is there objective truth?
I would say it was more of an abstract.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be consistent with it. Again, we've already laid out. I did a whole video laying out the psychedelic paradigm. So you would then also not be interested in a objective morality in regards to the advancement of one's spiritual journey, right?
Sure.
Is morality important for spiritual enlightenment?
I would assume so. Yes.
Which morality?
I don't know. The one I was born with.
Well,
I think we got some. I think we got some last man problems here.
People aren't born with morality, just like they're not born with intelligence.
Okay, so then it's a trick question. Then yes, somebody had to tell me something to get my morality.
Yeah, I just want to know if it's because we're getting into, and this is where Clinton and I and many of us, we've been having a conversation in regards to if psychedelics.
Did you say Clinton?
George Clinton,
bro,
not Bill.
Bro, I'm gonna have to mute. If you start yelling in the mic, bro, that's a no-go. So relax. When we were talking with Clinton earlier, if we're talking about do psychedelics lead to spiritual enlightenment, then that requires a sort of epistemic, objective forwardment towards whatever enlightenment is. Enlightenment has to be something that has a standard, because that's how else would you know if you're becoming more enlightened or less enlightened?
You don't.
Well, then
how would you measure enlightenment anyway?
Well, there's
it's
traditions all over
for each person.
Well, so there's no objective truth then. So if a man wants to be a woman, is that true?
No.
How come? It's everybody has their own truth, right?
Well, that's biological. No, I'm okay. You're missing me on that one, bro.
Well, I'm not for it, but I'm saying that.
Yeah, I'm not either.
But based on what you're saying, my point is that you're going to have real trouble justifying an epistemic basis.
Sorry, just waiting for the dogs.
So my point is,
so you're saying I have to get high to meet God or to be a better person?
Is that what is spiritual enlightenment? What is that?
I don't know. I don't.
Well, then
know.
how can psychedelics take you towards it if you don't even know what it is?
No, I'm saying I didn't say that. I said it was a possibility. You might see some shit. It's whatever. You might. I don't know.
It's not a possibility. That's why you take it. Unless you're getting bunk stuff.
Where do you get your stuff, Eric?
My freezer.
Mr. Nice guy.
So, Lucas, hard R, welcome, brother. What's your opinion? Are you believe psychedelics move you towards enlightenment or away, or not related at all?
I like drugs.
Fuck yeah! Good answer. Good answer.
Good
I'm
answer.
starting to see a
I
commonality with the with the people who are supportive. So, is there an objective standard for spiritual enlightenment?
Word salads and platitudes.
That's not word salads and platitudes, bub.
I couldn't nobody could follow what the fuck you were asking me.
Why are we talking about river aquatic animals. I don't.
You're just trying to do a got you to make you feel better,
Fucking
man. It's
platitudes.
okay. I'm here to play.
What are you talking about? We're
The
talking
word-
about an objective. Enlightenment would insinuate there's an objective standard for spiritual
You're
enlightenment.
asking impossible fucking questions. It's
No,
all
I'm not.
personal. Religion is
because you're
personal.
not,
If
you're
you
clearly
think
not
you could
intelligent
write it
enough
down
to
in
know
a
what we're
fucking
talking
book,
about.
you retard.
That's literally the question, dude. That's literally the question that we're here to talk about.
He's an idiot.
Go ahead and say the question again. Let me hear that again.
I think we're getting swamped by trolls here.
I think we are. We were having a good general conversation earlier, and Clinton is for. He's on your guys' side, and we're not here to do gotcha or anything. It's an honest conversation. But
So are you against drugs? Is that what you're
yeah,
saying?
my whole premise is I have a vast background with the use of psychedelics, and my point is that spiritual advancement is going to be tied to an objective morality and living your life morally, which is not going to be the same thing as the idea of gnosis or a Gnostic framework in which you attain spiritual knowledge, say it through inebriating substances, psychedelics, or whatever.
I agree. The acid turned me gay. The shrooms were fine. It was the acid.
All right.
So,
Yeah,
So you're trying to link everything to-
immoral to use drugs. Is that what you're saying?
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Lucas.
Yeah, it's immoral for you to use drugs. Is that what you're saying?
No, we're talking about spiritual advancement, spiritual enlightenment. It has to do with morality.
Right.
Yeah,
and
like
that's
Baze
what
said
I-
about
that's what I'm getting at.
a person with an injury, being prescribed something for surgery, right? That's not immoral in itself. It depends on the context, and as DPH is talking about, does the actual drug bring you closer to God or away, a spiritual advancement?
Yeah, well,
right?
like what? For example, Lucas, how do you define God?
Does it? Well, hold on. Just before we get in the weeds, like, does it make it moral because it's legal? Is that what you're saying by like
No, not at
prescriptions
all.
and shit?
We're not talking about that at all. Objective morality is how we differentiate right for wrong. And what I'm highlighting is that most people that implement part of the psychedelic spirituality is that they have no objective moral framework. They may have preferences and say that's right and that's wrong, but what moral framework are they working on, and how do they know that? And my point is that has to do with spiritual advancement. So whether somebody takes drugs or not, that has nothing to do with how much closer or further away they are from God. And many people who would be, for example, I played a video at the beginning of this stream with Ram Dass saying that psychedelics do indeed move you towards spiritual enlightenment. And that has to do with an understanding that you aren't who you really think you are, which again, I would disagree with. I think our names and our persons are actually important. And so in my conception of heaven or the kingdom, we maintain our identity. You don't just be subsumed back into God where your identity is an illusion, the idea of Maya, like in Hinduism or something like that. Or, many people say, oh, I got high and I realized that I am God and that who I think I am is an illusion and this type of thing. I think that's a delusion. So my point, there's a lot of intricacies here in regards to worldviews. That's what we're getting at with morality. It has nothing to do with legalization of drugs or anything like that. Do psychedelics move you towards a clear understanding of spiritual truths in the world itself?
I don't think they lead you away from it.
You don't think people get more deluded through drugs?
I definitely
It's a
think they do.
possibility.
Well,
In
then
my experience, they
if
have.
that's a possibility, then they could.
Can I share my experience when I saw God? Well, it was the first time I took a big dick.
What? All right.
Later. All right. So in my
guess- I
experience,
guess
right,
that
I've known a
B
lot
is
of
a
people
drug.
get deluded from this stuff and that was the whole reason why I called in, because somebody said, well, taking this stuff can help certain people see through the modernist BS or whatever. They realize some emotional baggage they have, or they get some pragmatic benefit from taking the psychedelic, right? But I think that ends up solidifying them in their delusion. It makes it actually harder for them to. So I've had people tell me like, oh, well, I realized Jesus was God through acid, so clearly, it's good, right? But I think that if that person ends up, entering the body of Christ, joining and actually becoming an actual authentic Christian, it's in spite of the fact that they took that substance if they actually do make it, rather than because of the substance. Because 9 times out of 10, the people that take it usually come out deluded, because it's much harder to reach a person who thinks they're already enlightened, who thinks they've already found the truth, right? Than somebody who's a blank slate, who just needs to, have the seed sown, so to speak.
You keep trying to link everything to an objective morality, but I think that gets into like, that implies good and evil, right? So
Absolutely.
So
because you said that there was bad entities that you can encounter on psychedelics. My question was, how do you differentiate a bad entity from a good entity, which is similar to good and evil?
well, yeah, I'm thinking about good and evil. Like, is morality good then? Who decides what is
God.
good?
God.
Yeah, that would be God.
So how do you know what he believes to be good?
I
Through
believe
Christ.
God. Yeah, Jesus Christ, in that God revealed himself through scripture. Mine's going to be basis in regards to revealed text. Now, there's different revealed text. The Rig Veda is a revealed text. The Muslims claim the Quran's a revealed text. You don't have to believe in any of those. But if you believe in an objective morality, how do you situate that, or how do you come to know that? If you believe in pure materialism, then there is no objective morality. All morality and ethics are socially constructed. And I don't believe that in social constructed ethics. So therefore, if whether China allowed pedophilia or not, pedophilia is wrong. I
So
don't care what civilization agreed or disagreed with something.
do you think you can know good without knowing evil?
I can't know good without knowing God. Evil, in my worldview, has a negative ontology. So evil is not battling the good. The good is God, and evil is the privation of. It's the absence of those energies.
I feel like you got to get back on drugs, man. Like I feel like you were getting there, and then you're like, "Fuck it, I don't need the drugs," and now you're off into some woo woo, like
Well, based on how
kind of
articulate you are, your
pseudo
worldview,
spiritualism, man. Like I feel like drugs really helps you cut through the bullshit, man.
it doesn't sound like you've cut through much bullshit, to be honest. You
How
can
so?
hardly articulate yourself in just in regards to objective morality and how whether you agree or disagree or what God is or what
How can I
worldview you.
hardly articulate myself? I've said like fucking 17 words on here.
I
What are
know,
you
but
talking about?
the fact that you have to say fuck, like, dude, you can hardly speak,
I can say fuck because I want to.
and
I'm
it
an
shows
adult.
it shows a general lack of intelligence and just
How?
because
There's
we're
literally
having a.
studies done that say that fucking the people that curse more are more intelligent. So what's that
Is
say
that right?
about you?
This is
Okay.
usually the stuff that you learn,
We're on the
in high
internet.
school.
I assume you got Google.
Well, if anything,
I don't know. Maybe
studies have
I
shown
just
that
got a beard.
studies don't
I'm
mean a
some
lot.
redneck that says the fuck word. Oh, I'm a stupid motherfucker, huh?
All right.
Oh yeah.
I think we're seeing a consistency now. Clinton, you've been a great sport, brother, and I hope that you feel like we've treated you with the utmost respect. Whether we agree or not, that's not the point. We just want to have a civil conversation. So
Yeah, I agree.
So
yeah.
Clayton, I just too did. So you're of the opinion that psychedelics do lead to spiritual advancement?
I think they can. I think it depends on the individual. Like, intention plays a huge role when you use psychedelics. So if you go into a psychedelic experience and you're full of fear,
Yeah.
you have repressed emotions, maybe trauma that you haven't dealt with, then there's a good chance that you're going to have an intense experience, maybe a bad trip, or you may have to face some darknesses, some demons, however you want to perceive it within yourself. But if you go into a psychedelic experience with the intention of seeking the truth and gaining self-knowledge and seeking enlightenment, I think it can definitely help you. It can assist you. It
Well,
cannot not grant it to you, but assist you.
I agree that intention plays a part in it. I've had a lot of experiences with these things. I used to take it a lot, like high school to right outside of high schools, and I definitely have had different experiences, good, bad, whatever, all depending on the set and setting, as they say, and my intentions and all that. But I guess the question is, like, what is the goal? What are you aiming at? You said truth, right? So do you believe that like one needs to be inebriated to reach that truth, or that inebriation process is almost like a fast forward button to get to the truth? And if so, why?
I don't really look at magic mushrooms or the psychedelic experience as a form of intoxication or inebriation. I look at it as a sobering, really, because
when you look at the nature of the psychedelic experience, it sobers you up. It gets you off of things like alcohol, pharmaceutical drugs, and other
I get
dangerous substances.
I get what you're saying, but I think we could objectively prove that it's an inebriating substance just because if you were to ask somebody to like walk a straight line or like, like recount specific memory. I mean, I don't know. That's just a guess, but I would assume that there'd be some impaired motor function and slurring of speech and stuff. That I think that's why I use the word inebriating.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that depends on the person too, and how much experience you have with them.
That's
Like
true.
for example, I could be on psychedelics and people wouldn't even notice.
Yeah, some people get really good at video games or riding a bike or certain activities to get into like the zone or whatever. So I guess that's true.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think coming from a Christian perspective, we believe in objective truth, right, and objective morality, and we believe that God can be known, and that our logical faculties and our whole body are sort of designed with the purpose of communing with God and knowing God, and that when you make a mediator like a substance like that, you don't need that, and that can actually be detrimental to knowing God, right? Because in our perspective, Christ calls us to be sober, to be vigilant, to be watchful, to be mindful, to be heedful, and that is the things, the actual looking at the real reality in front of you that will lead you to a fuller understanding of God, and not sort of the experience that I've had on psychedelics where your mind sort of gets jumbled and you become more open to suggestions and things that might come in, which from a Christian perspective, we would say like a demon or a demonic influence, where you could have sort of thoughts or ideas implanted in your mind and not have the discernment and the sober mind to really analyze what that is.
Yeah.
I
Amy,
got
welcome.
lucky.
What are
Hi.
your thoughts? Welcome to the conversation.
Well, I got lucky and I was raised very Pentecostal, honestly. And so I had a connection with God and all that. And then I started selling acid and doing a lot of drugs. I do agree with you about how, yeah, it's definitely a mind altering substance and all of that. I don't know. I spent so much time trying to figure out my earbud that I kind of just like I was over it before you finally let me on, honestly.
Okay.
So, fuck. Is this a Christian channel?
Yeah, I'm an Orthodox Christian. I had a large psychedelic channel called Fractal Universe back in the day, which is now just David Patrick Harry. And so I am now dual streaming, and that's probably where you saw this, is
Yeah.
to a lot of people that are supportive of psychedelics, which is fine. Clinton, he's supportive of psychedelics, and we've had very cordial, civil conversations. The point was just to discuss this, and my goal was to have people of different opinions on, but unfortunately, the people
I
that came
remember
on
what I
started.
was going to say.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
What I was going to say was I totally agree with you about like I had a few experiences on mushrooms and acid where I actually cleaned my life up, if that makes sense. Like I didn't want to drink so much, I didn't want to smoke so much, and all of that. That's basically what my thought was before I had all of my technology problems, and now I just want to leave because I'm shy. So
Well, I would say to that, I mean, that's a good point, right? And a lot of people bring that up, like I said earlier, about getting some sort of like pragmatic benefit out of these things. I was able to give up my alcoholism, or I was able to give up, my
yeah.
drug addiction, things like that, and that's a real
Yeah,
position
I
people
wanted to
have.
become vegetarian for a while, but
Sure.
I really
I-
love meat, so
I guess it asks what's the goal, what's the point, right? Because as a Christian, our goal isn't necessarily happiness, right, or like a good life, right? It's to
no,
know
a better
God,
connection with the universe and
to
just
know
like
God,
what makes it all
right? And so
happen.
I believe that the devil, the enemy, can give us beneficial things in our life, power, money, happiness, comfort, these things, but that it's actually detrimental to the goal of our life, which is communion with God, right? And in fact, our suffering ends up drawing us closer to God. Our suffering is
Yeah.
salvific; it purifies us, and so I think that's a big distinction we have to make. That just because you were
Your
alleviated of one
chat
problem.
is insane, dude. I just want to say your chat is
Which
crazy.
tat? I'm on multiple platforms here. Which chat? Are you talking about the David Patrick Carey channel or Church of the Eternal Logos?
YouTube.
I'm on 2 different YouTube channels live right now.
Oh, are you? Oh, well,
Yeah.
that's probably why you showed up in the
That's
live
why I'm trying to
thing.
ask you which YouTube channel you're on. Are you on David Patrick Carey or are you on Church of the
I don't
Eternal
even
Logos?
know anymore, dude. I was trying to figure out my earbud and my laptop, and nothing wanted to connect and pair or whatever that means.
Okay.
So
Honestly, a big reason why I called in was I wanted to ask Baze to give us his Mike Lindell impression of the. He
I
just
wanna hear
dropped
that
acid
too.
for the. Okay, so Baze, it's Mike Lindell. He just dropped acid for the first time yesterday. Go.
Listen, my experience in Minnesota, it comes from the fact that I had a hard time sleeping because of the crack for many years. And my good friend, the governor of Minnesota, he suggested that I take ayahuasca. So one night I was playing in the garbage with some thrown away rubber pieces, and I thought this would be a good pillow. So then I cleaned up my life. So yeah, acid helped me clean up my life. Because my pillows are made in Minnesota. I use that acid to temper the rubber pieces for the pillows. So we use every little piece we have. That's my contribution.
Mr. Lindell, how are things been since, you speaking out about the 2020 election has certainly deplatformed you and sort of isolated your business? Are things still going well?
They still have those funnels, and they're coming to save us. They're coming to save us. John Jr. is still alive. I saw him at the Q convention. He's coming to just wait till the midterms.
Patriots are in control.
Wow.
That's
so,
the
well, I
Patriots
mean,
are always in control. What are you saying about this great country? There's only one leader. You know who it is. We can't say it. He made a personal stop to my factory in Minnesota.
Oh my goodness. So Patrick, did I just tuned in? I was doing my own stream, but did you get any good people calling in as far as
Clinton's been fantastic, man.
Yeah,
he's just been laying out his opinion and going back and forth, incredibly civil. It was just right at the end here. We got a bunch, and then they started spamming my chat, saying the N-word, F, all the words, trying to get my stuff taken. It's like, guys, there's no need to do any of that stuff. But
what have been some of the main arguments made in support of psychedelics being spiritually beneficial?
The numinous and the mystical experience that they offer. And then that's where I've been trying to, my general take was in how do we know if it's good or bad? Welcome, Max, by the way. And so we've just been trying to decipher if they do lead to enlightenment, how do we know enlightenment one way or another? But Max, welcome, brother. What are you, yay or nay? What's your opinion? Max?
Kanye or no, that's lame. I'm sorry.
You're muted, Max.
No, his mic's on.
Everything.
There he is.
I'm muted.
No, I can hear you. We can hear you now. Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. Go ahead, bro. No, you're muted now. Hit the mic again. Now you're muted. You weren't muted before.
I just.
I'm sorry, Patrick. I
See what you did, Jerry. You're muted, brother. You're muted. You weren't muted earlier. We just couldn't hear you. Now you're good. Now you're good. Now you're good. Yeah. What's up?
Now
you're good.
Finally.
Yeah. What's up, man?
Thank you for this really interesting chat. This is something that I've been looking for. This is something I've been researching myself. This is something I have been researching myself for a long time about the psychedelics and the means to find illumination. Again?
Right. No, we can hear you. Keep going.
You can hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay. So least 9 or 10 years psychedelics to find out. And I started with the godfather of all, which is Carlos Castaneda. Carlos Castaneda was the one who put all this stuff of the new age on the table, on the platform during the 70s as part of the counterculture, which was created by the CIA as part of controlled dissidents to control the people who weren't happy with the war of Vietnam, and to have the people, the hippies or the people who were against system, going around drugged, while people like Henry Kissinger and the big machine, war machines of America, were making war in Vietnam constantly, doing horrifying things, while the people were going around saying happy flower power, God bless marijuana, whatever. Myself, I have been a consumer of marijuana for a long time in my life. And I'm going to be honest with you guys. I had a really hard time leaving that fucking drug. And there is one thing I wanted to start with Carlos Castaneda. This book that I have here, this is a book that is the only made biography of Carlos Castaneda, because the guy liked to pose as a mystery to make his fame much bigger during the 70s and the 80s in the United States. I read all the books of Castaneda, but this book is the only book which is wrote by a Spanish author. By the way, I'm listening to you guys from Marbella, Spain. And the thing is that in this book, the writer, which is called Manuel Carballal, which is one of the best researchers of Spain, which really is lacking in good journalism, to be honest. This man, Manuel Carballal, who has written the only authorized biography of Carlos Castaneda. Why is it the only authorized biography? Because this man was the student of Carlos Castaneda for at least 10 or 12 years. And this man in his biography relates perfectly, deemed as an anthropologist. His first book, The Teachings of Don Juan, which is a marvelous literary book, area or platform of the drugs to find illumination, right? But the truth is that the right pages, well documented, is telling you and giving you information how Carlos Castaneda was from the CIA or University, which is one of the universities which is much corrupted by the CIA in the United States. In that university, they gave him the PhD in anthropology without even presenting the first book, which is Don Juan Mathus, The Teachings of Don Juan Mathus, without footnotes, without nothing. Now, personally, myself, I'm a student. I have a PhD in Nietzsche, and I know how a PhD works and how you have to give a paper to a university. That book should have never been granted a PhD, and Carlos Castaneda should have never been an anthropologist, because that book doesn't have any proof about nothing. Now, what I wanted to tell you guys, which is really, really central to this discussion that we're having here, the first drug that Carlos Castaneda explains in the Teachings of Don Juan is called La Hierba del Diablo. That is the herb of the devil. Now, do you think that is a coincidence that he calls that the herb of the devil, which is the herb or the datura kind of herb, which he uses to put high to Castaneda, I mean Don Juan, makes him be high with that herb. And all the teachings begin with the herb of the devil. That in itself, just that signature, the devil, is how these people in the elites and the Satanists work. But not to speak about that Castaneda had a long, not very long, but he was massive in the 70s. Again?
No, we're hearing you.
We're good.
That's
Now
interesting. He started with the Tura. Wow.
And Max, I totally agree with. I know BLA based up there would also concur, is that we didn't even get into the MK Ultra and the CIA relationship to all these drugs. Oh, you muted yourself, Max. You were just unmuted.
He's definitely
you guys
preaching to
talking
the
about
choir.
the devil's lettuce? You talking about like Hierba del Diablo?
Yeah, no, I mean for sure you're preaching to the choir. We're
Is
all
it
in
now?
agreement on that.
Yes,
Yeah,
no,
you're good
exactly.
now.
Like
You're good.
You're good, Max.
But am I still muted?
No, we can hear you now, Max. But I was saying
But
that
do you hear me, guys?
Yes.
Yes, we hear you. I think your internet's a little slow
Can you
and there's
hear
a
me?
lag.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
You
There must be a lag.
Yeah, we can hear you, bro.
Yeah, we can hear you. Clinton,
know,
do you got something, brother? I think we're gonna start wrapping up here. I got a few super chats. If you guys
It's
don't
my
mind, we can
internet.
run through.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's your internet. It's your internet. It's not you're not muted anymore.
Now can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
I think it's really
Now you can
important
hear
to
me?
understand
Thank God,
psychology.
for God's sake. Oh,
I think if you're going to get into psychedelics, you really need to understand
yes,
psychology.
of course.
And like when you look at what happened in the 60s when
If you
psychedelics
just
kind of
permit
blew
me
up on the
finish, because
scene.
I think this is off, which is casting,
Sure.
right? So
We can't hear you, Max. There you go.
basically, he had a cult of followers, and those. May I just, if I can, just finish my speech? I will get out of the conversation. Castaneda, he had like 4 or 5 girls who were his acolytes. The guy loved to have sex with all of them. He was the kind of guru that you could equate compared to somebody like Osho, who had 92 Rolls Royce. What I'm trying to tell you here is that Castaneda, all the things that he had were promoted kind of things, is not to illuminate humanity. It's precisely for the opposite of that.
Right.
That's the history of the CIA. Let's not forget the CIA. It has been in its inception, and Castaneda had been flippant.
Max, your internet,
CIA, and that's why they did
Max,
so much. How do you call it? Yes.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to cut you off, Max, but DP.
Yes.
You know, that's, what you're saying is true, and DPH's whole channel is he's gone through this history.
Yeah, my other channel is all about this, but Max, your internet's going in and out. We can't hear everything you're saying, and we apologize.
But you did get your point out, and we do understand.
Yeah, and you make a great point, Max, because you know, I did a whole thing on the CIA relationship with Timothy Leary. He admitted this was towards the later 80s that the CIA was actually helping him get some of his LSD 25, and that he said, well, basically, you know, we're all playing for a team. You either play for the Yankees or the Red Sox. You know, I chose the CIA. And talking about intelligence agencies in regards to their infiltration of cultural figures and stuff like that. So I'm totally with you. MK Ultra, all that different stuff.
And also the fact that it's not there for illumination, but it's there for confusion. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, the trouble with the illumination in this case is that they have made sure that all the possible you can go to be enlightened with this herb.
Max, I'm sorry, we just can't hear you, man. You keep going in and out. I apologize, brother. Thank you so much for coming on. But we're almost at the 3-hour mark, so I'm just gonna wrap up here and do some super chats real quick.
Yeah, I'll hop off, DPH.
No, all right. You guys can stay for a second. Now, Clinton, I want to thank you, brother, for being here. You have been a great guest, and I've really enjoyed going back and forth with you. I hope you've enjoyed it as well, and you found us charitable and civil. I really appreciate you coming on, man.
Yeah, thanks. I enjoyed it, other than the trolls.
Yeah, well, that's exactly. It makes a good thing. Even the people on my old channel, the psychedelic people, thought we were having a really good conversation until they came on and they started to make them look bad. And it's like, it's ridiculous. Like, you don't have to, because then they got off and they started trying to flag my YouTube channel and get it taken down by, you know, saying inappropriate words that we all know YouTube doesn't appreciate.
Yeah.
So, but BLA and Jerry, thank you guys for being here. Stay here for a second. I just want to run through a few super chats. We can bounce them off each other. First one came in from First one came in from Ross Campbell, threw in $12.75. He says, psychedelics can open you up to demons. After I took XTAC, or I guess ecstasy, when I was younger, and ecstasy is a much more mild psychedelic. So I think when Clinton was talking about myself and BLA, we're talking a little bit harder, but certainly MDMA would be in that group of psychedelics. I was younger. The next night I had sleep paralysis, hallucinating shadow figures. Also know many people who have mild schizophrenia from heavy drug use.
Yep.
Yeah, that can
100%.
happen. Not everybody, but it can happen. And even Terence McKenna talked about how and this is where I think Clinton was even talking about, you need to know a little bit about psychology, that certain people this isn't, it's not for everybody. If you have a weak psychological disposition, bad things can happen, especially if you have a lot of trauma built inside. So you got to be careful. Everybody has different tolerances and different experiences. I mean, would you agree with that, Clinton?
Yeah, Terence McKenna also said very bluntly that psychedelics don't work on stupid people. So he said that if they expand your mind, they expand your consciousness, and if there's nothing in there, then there's nothing to expand on. So
he did make that point.
Fortunately, I think you can cure that by reading.
I have known a lot of stupid people that took psychedelics, so but maybe they didn't work on them, I guess. But yeah, I have known a lot of them. As for sleep paralysis, I also had sleep paralysis experiences and literally seen a demon.
I've never had sleep paralysis.
It only happened one time. I woke up, and it was right when I got into witchcraft. I was basically about 4 or 5 months studying that stuff, and I'd started trying to do these little rituals and stuff. And the one night I woke up and I couldn't move. And I've told this story before. I saw this demon across the room from me, which looked like 2 snakes standing on their tail. It was like one figure, but that's like the closest thing I could describe. It was like 2 snakes with this energy between them, a long tongue of fire. Yeah, reaching across the room onto me, sucking off of me. I couldn't move. I could only move my eyes. And I looked over, and my girlfriend had a miniature one on top of her, sucking off of her. And I was so terrified. And I with all my will, tried to force myself to sit up. And I couldn't move for about 15, 20 seconds. And I was just looking at it wide. And I finally sat up, and I was awake the whole time. And there was no break in consciousness. I was awake from the point I was laying down, couldn't move. Sat up. As soon as I sat up, they were gone, but I was still awake, and I was like, man, maybe this occult stuff isn't so good. And but I kept doing it for months after that. But
yeah, that's wild. I've heard a lot of nasty experiences with sleep paralysis.
Yeah.
Okay. Next super chat came in from the Big 7-footer. Throws in $10 and says, prayers up for Chase. Yeah, it's God bless Chase Haggard. It sounds like he's been sick with food poisoning. Wish him nothing but the best. Thanks for hopping on, brother. We really appreciate your tidbits of wisdom, and God bless you. We hope you start feeling better. Next one actually comes from the man himself. Chase Haggard throws in $3, and he says, I think your guest may be a monist. Maybe running through refutations of monism would be useful. And we did a little bit of that in regards to asking Clinton your general thoughts on. Well, maybe we can wrap it up here and ask you a few more questions. Clinton, would you consider Earth or creation or the universe divine? Curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I would, because
okay. And is it of the same essence as God?
I don't know if it's the same essence as God, but I do consider creation, the universe, the earth, divine. And I think that Indigenous people were aware of that existence of the sacred, and they referred to it as the Great Spirit. And then, but you can see that cross-culturally as well. You have the Holy Spirit or the Holy Ghost in Christianity. You have prana. You have ether. What else is there? There's
Ruach in the Old Testament, but as a Christian, we would say, yeah, we agree, but none of those other worldviews equate the Spirit as part of the Godhead. So that's where the Trinity is a unique formation. So like as a Christian, I would say, if you don't worship the Trinity, we don't worship the same God. I'm not telling you, to do anything, but I was just highlighting that I agree with you, like prana, Ruach in the Old Testament. all these other the Great Spirit. There's a lot of different religions pointing to a sort of sacredness of a sort of non-physical sort of presence of God, if you will, a sort of ethereal presence of God. I agree, and I think that is true. And I would say all those religions are pointing towards the Trinity. Not that you would agree with that. I wouldn't expect you to, but I agree that the idea that there is a great spirit is tied to a unique person, the third person of a Trinity. So there's one essence, but there's three hypostatizations of the Godhead as three unique persons. But that's where we were asking about monism. If you believe like God is oneness, for example, that's where most people, if you ask most people about God, they say, yeah, God is one. God is one. And then we would argue, can God be multiple? And they would have to say, like a Muslim, for example, would have to say, no, Allah can't be multiple. And we would say that's why the Trinity is superior, because it's one and three.
Like omnipresent?
Well, not just omnipresent, but can God be more than one? Like if Allah is just pure unity, think of like in Neoplatonism, their worldview is a dot with concentric circles. And so the one, or the monad, is the center. And then the first circle they would call the logos, but it would be created. We don't believe the logos is created. We believe it's the second person. It's God. But if God is oneness, so then they privilege unity over multiplicity. That's why if in a Platonic or a Neoplatonic worldview, multiplicity is lesser than pure unity, because that's the whole goal of creation, is to get back to pure unity with God.
Yeah, I think, yeah, like with the fallen state as well. I think that's important. I think that relates to Indigenous people. Indigenous people, they didn't just have a belief in the sacred existence that flows like through the earth, through nature, through all life. It wasn't a belief, it was a relationship, and they honored that relationship. So
I like that.
I think that that's the main teaching that they had, which allowed them to live in harmony and balance with the earth for thousands of years here, because under their governance and stewardship, they kept all of the land and water clean and pristine for thousands of years, and they were the last pyramid building culture on earth. So I think there's a lot of mystery there, and there's also a lot of unconscious biases, because if you look at something like Apocalypto, the movie,
Yep, seen that.
if you look at the portrayal of the pyramids and the city, they're dirty, they're dusty, the people are behaving terribly, they're cutting off people's heads. I think all of that stems from unconscious bias, because I've read a few books with firsthand accounts of the first Europeans to come here, and they describe the Aztec city of Tenochtitlan as basically immaculate, as clean, shining, just the most beautiful city they've ever seen. So I think that we have to be very, very skeptical when we learn about Indigenous people and Indigenous history. Even the practice of shamanism, right from the beginning, was demonized as a form of witchcraft, as Satanism, or
well, can it be a form of witchcraft?
It is.
Right. There's reasons for that. And also, you're absolutely right that anytime you read a primary source, you have to take into account the biases of who wrote it, whose
Agreed.
perspective you're looking at. But there's also a danger there where you can conflate like all these different indigenous groups as all one thing. And there was a bunch of different spiritual practices. And as far as like firsthand accounts, what's that one conquistador priest that went over there, Pedro de la Saison or whatever, talking about the people in Peru, and his accounts are the exact opposite, that they were savage, that they were, doing these horrible things as well, using human bodies as furniture, and keeping women trapped in cages to birth babies that they would eat ritualistically, like things, horrible things. I think some of that probably happened, some of it may have been overblown, but to say, oh, they lived in harmony and peace, that's something that we hear a lot of. And I mean, I don't necessarily believe that's true. I think that, I don't know, go on.
Their cities may be pristine and immaculate almost all of the time, but during the rituals that are so significant to their own religion that allows them to, as you said, live in harmony. They practice human sacrifice for which is what many worldwide pagan, the Vikings did this, right?
Yeah.
In order to ensure a crop season or whatever, and a lot of that in that movie comes from their own art. So I'm not sure it's a bias. I'm sure there is, obviously there's going to be bias in there regarding some things, but that was essential to the practice of their religion, right?
Yeah,
was
it's
human
a well-known fact that Mayans had different a rain god and a sun god, and the rain god needed children, and this god needed boys, and this god needed girls, and these different sort of. It's a transactional relationship between.
And to be fair, it is true that indigenous cultures worldwide, they do have a veneer of living in harmony with nature, of course. But so do Christians. The ones who destroy nature and the aesthetic and make such a
mess of the
world to live in are the people that are the very people that were the anthropologists who went to Mexico. Literally went to Mexico. He was he went over there. He found a bruja. That's where he got the ergot, and that's where they synthesized LSD. So it came from this very thing. They were aware of this. They just used it. That's in John Marx. That's in the John Marx book. So that these are the same people that corrupt everything that we see, and certainly psychedelics are weaponized. I mean, they are. They were spread during the 60s for that purpose. So yeah, I mean, you can experience these things, and like you said, everyone knows, like when a person is going to go on their trip, yeah, it's their psychological state that's going to determine how it is. But that doesn't really mean anything in terms of seeking purpose and salvation for your soul. That's just temporary. That's a good feeling.
Right. I mean, how many people feel like they've reached this state of enlightenment during their trip, and then when they come out, and they say this, it's like, okay, well, explain it. They can't explain it, or it's just sort of gibberish. They took notes during the trip, or they recorded themselves saying, and then you listen back, and it's just a bunch of gibberish. I mean, that's like a common thing,
There's a great book on that. It's called The Variety of Religious Experience, I think, by William James.
Yeah.
Right.
Very familiar with it.
Yeah, that's a great book.
But his definition of religion is subjective. So in regards to, my PhD's in religious studies, William James, we always use his definition of religion, which is, it's like the ultimate concern in which an individual orients their life. And his whole focus was on mystical experience, because he did nitrous oxide right at the end of the 19th century. And he was a devout atheist materialist. He did nitrous oxide, and he is convinced that spirituality then was real. But he was very against organized religion. So his definition of religion then was just like ultimate concern and experience regarding like mysticism. So yeah, I think William James, he's like one of the few American scholars we have that Europeans read.
Damn, that dude was doing whippets at the Widespread concert.
Whippets.
Oh yeah, I mean, that stuff was popular back then. I
It
was
was.
reading some stuff about, they would have these parties that get together and do the magic gas. It's the magical gas.
I actually, in the second half of my video, the last stream I did on was on drug mysticism. The second half of that paper on my website was talking about nitrous oxide and how it got invented towards the end, or the very beginning of the 19th century, the 1800s. And it wasn't until like 40 years before they even knew about the anesthetic properties, because people were so blown away by the mysticism they experienced that Victorian England was all about these secret parties where they would just do nitrous oxide. And they were very much interested in the book, The Arabian Nights. And this is where, through Paris and France, cannabis and hashish started getting in to the culture. So in regards to the intelligentsia, they were definitely doing nitrous oxide, and then if they could, they would get their hands on hashish. They were really very interested in hashish.
All that happened while they were like, listen, this coca that we put in the Coca-Cola is like out of control. We're in pain, so we need to invent something to alleviate the pain. How about this thing called heroin? Like Bayer's going to put a trademark on that. It's going to be great.
Yeah, this soda's really good, man. I don't know why it's so good. Yeah. Yeah, interesting for sure. I think, to compare something like the mystical experiences one gets from psychedelics, you look at the mystical traditions of Christianity and just compare the two. And I think,
Well,
one
and
is
that's
much
where I
more
would relate back
boosted
to
and-
what Clinton said in regards to Christian mysticism is always relational. So I thought obviously he doesn't need to adopt our worldview or believe we're telling the truth, but I would definitely second that. Clinton mentioned about some of the native traditions really think about divinity in regards to a relationship, and that's how we understand it because our God's personal. It's three persons, one essence. And so that's something that I think is a big takeaway because not all mysticism is relational. Like, for example, when we look into forms of Eastern mysticism, it's about the annihilation of the concept of the individual person. And so that is not relational. That's actually the opposite of relational.
Right.
What did Jung had a great quote about religious experience and religion. He said that one of the main functions of organized religion is to protect people from a direct experience of God.
Well, I wouldn't disagree with that completely. I think that there has to be a distinction made between organized religion and Christianity. You know what I mean? Because not all organized religion is the same. Not all, I would agree that like a lot of organized religion, 99% of them would keep you from a real direct experience of God. But I believe in Christianity, you actually do get because I don't consider Christianity a organized religion. I consider it the true faith, right?
Well, and you really mean orthodoxy, which we always have to
Yeah.
describe because it's so different than
I've
the
been trying
Western
to,
forms.
yeah, I've been trying to just use the word Christianity for orthodoxy, and then
It's
if I'm
hard.
talking about
Nobody knows what
Protestant-
you're talking about.
I know. I've been saying like authentic Christianity, but because that's what it is. I mean, it's authentic
Agreed.
Christianity.
Agree. Maybe I should do a stream on the history of Christianity and or debate the history of Christianity because we know Catholics, they hate us.
Yeah.
They're all about the papacy.
Good.
Next super chat came in from Mickey C. Threw in $5. Thank you so much, Mickey C. He said, "Have you heard of DMTX?"
No,
I've never heard of DMTX. Clinton, you heard of DMTX? BLA? Anybody?
That's DMT you buy on the new Twitter.
There's right. There's NN, right, which is
Well,
the
yeah.
typical
There's
DMT, and then there's 5-MeO.
Yeah, there's
and
5-MeO. Yeah, and but I've never heard of DMTX. He says, new nautics. Have you heard of DMTX new nautics? Some interesting studies into extended DMT experiences with a focus on the contacting of entities. Seems like they are focusing on how we could have some type of psychedelic augmented reality in the future.
Sure.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, let me
It's
type
a research chemical. It's guaranteed it's going to be a research
let me
chemical.
put this in DMTX.
And I've definitely heard people
nautics.
talk about, using DMT as a sort of a mechanism to contact entities with, like, what was that guy that wrote the Spirit Molecule book, did those studies, right, where he used the intravenous injection and sort of wrote it like a roller coaster, he said, where he would turn the dial up and then turn it down, turn it up. And I'm sure it could be used in that function.
Okay, so DMTX is a program related to Dr. Strassman. So Rick Strassman, if you guys are familiar with his work with MAPS. Yeah. So DMTX is something they're doing with extended stays in the DMT state. So I'm not familiar with that. It seems like
and that was my whole point, is that's what he was doing. He was literally, I mean, that's
Rick
one of the things
Strassman
he was
did the
doing.
research down at New Mexico University. And that's what caused the whole Spirit Molecule documentary with Joe Rogan and everything. And that's when I was deep, trying to get my 4 hits of DMT before I blasted off back in the day.
That shit to me sounds like a permanent state of like Jacob's Ladder, the movie.
Hey, did you ever take that? Did you ever take DMT?
No, hell no.
Oh, really?
No,
See,
I never.
I took it a bunch of times in high school, and for the first maybe 5 or 6 trips, we were snorting it and not actually smoking it.
Whoa!
We didn't have one of the pipes that you needed to smoke it, so you'd have to take a lot more of it to get it to work snorting. But basically, it hurt so bad, it burned so bad.
Oh my god, I imagine.
And it would literally the pain would ramp up until you blast it off. So it was a really weird experience. But
I always thought that shit was. I always thought that shit was evil.
I mean, it was, man. I remember the one time I took it and I was laying on a bed and I had like 12 shadow people standing over me looking at
The ring
me, and
rays.
it was like ring rays, right? And their faces were like contorting and stuff. And I would see those shadow people all the
Isn't
time.
it produced in the brain naturally?
They say that,
Yeah.
but I haven't heard any like.
Well, I
solid
did
evidence.
actually have a interview I did with Dr. David E. Nichols. He's the #1 neuropsychologist or neuropharmacologist. He synthesized the psilocybin that they've done in all like federal trials. He's all part of the 1960s counterculture and everything, but he is a bit of a critic of the whole pineal gland thing. So he's done studies showing that the pineal gland does not produce enough dimethyltryptamine to actually produce any sort of active hallucinatory state. And if you can look that up, he has a whole article written on it, and I did a conversation with him. If you look up DMT, pineal gland, the truth or something, it's going to be by Dr. David E. Nichols.
And I started hearing about
we do produce it naturally, but to blast off, you have to break that blood-brain barrier. You need a lot more.
Right.
And so it is in everything, right? That's the whole thing is, you can find DMT in like all organic stuff, but I personally don't believe in the third eye and the pineal gland based on my conversations with him. I mean, majority what the pineal gland has produced melatonin for the regulation of your sleep cycle.
When I hear about that, I just think Adreno. I always thought it was the same as the Adreno thing. I mean, it looks like it. And, when you hear pineal gland, I just think I don't want anything. I never wanted anything to do with it. Even the initials of the name of it, I'm like, why can't it be? I mean, I guess, PCP is, those are initials. But that's, that's
TLC.
the big yeah, you get a little TLC. Don't do that. Don't go to Washington, D.C. and ride the Big Dipper, they call it.
5 Gallon Phillips said, look up the 8th sphere. I mean, I'm not familiar. He says it's where the technocratic occultists want to take us.
5 Gallon Phillip. That reminds me of the Whitest Kids You Know sketch of the 5 gallons of PCP. You ever see that? Baze, do you ever see that?
Dust.
Or no, that's the 1 gallon of PCP. Yeah, the gallon of PCP. That's a good one, man. All right,
okay,
Trevor.
it's a theosophical. The 8th sphere is a theosophical understanding. Okay, got it.
Is that where the watch?
Anyways, yeah, that's it. Next super chat came in from BMX 1966. Shout out to you, brother. Really appreciate the support. He throws in $10 and says, "Great vid." Well, thank you guys, and again, special thank you to Clinton for being such a great guest and going back and forth. Really appreciate you, bro, for hopping on. Again, anybody who agrees or disagrees, you guys are always more than welcome to come. Just keep it civil. We don't need F-bombs and, trolling and stuff like that. So thank you, Clinton, for coming on, brother. We really appreciate you
were a good sport, dude.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Next one comes from Orthodox Boomer Grandma. Throws in 1999. Shout out to Orthodox Boomer Grandma. We love you, Alexandria. And she says, for putting up with Max, DPH. Well, thank you so much. God bless you and the family. I know that your icons are now up. So, guys, make sure you contact Alexandra if you want to get some of her icons. Her and her husband's business is up and running. And then last super chat came from Ross Campbell, 12, throws in $6.37. He says, honest answer, do you think the world is flat? Jerry, you want to take that one first?
The Earth is a cube. All right. I played this on my show, and we had a real.
I thought it was
a
the
cube.
tetrahedron, man.
Baze was there. Remember that, Henley? We got the real
Yeah.
video from space. We saw it ourselves. It's a cube. End of story.
There we go.
They used to have huge, beautiful buildings, man, in tetrahedron Earth. And now they got these McDonald's, man. The giants and the Anunnaki roam the Earth.
Yeah.
That's Tartaria.
My general, so I'm more of a, call me a shill. I do believe the Earth is round, but I also am very skeptical of space. So I don't believe in the moon landing, and I believe that there's potentially a firmament. So I guess that's how I straddle both worldviews. I'll give you the firmament, but the round Earth seems to make sense. Even though I've looked into the flat Earth and I'm familiar with all their arguments. I know Zerka's repopularizing it by going around talking about flat Earth and stuff like that. Or both said Earth is shapeless. There you go. Round like a plate. Some people. Okay, well, there's a few things I don't talk about. I don't debate the shape of the earth because I don't know. I don't debate how old the earth is, because if you believe in a creator God, then he can create a 13.8 billion year old universe, feasibly within a few thousand years, 12,000 years, 20,000 years, 7,000. I don't know. It doesn't matter. I don't believe in macro evolution. I'm willing to go out on that limb because there's no evidence between the leap between species, but I guess I'm a round earth shill. So
yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of us agree on not trusting NASA, and I don't necessarily believe anybody can get off the earth or anything like that. But it's just that they take on this label flat earther, and they're committed to that idea, and it's almost as absurd as committing to the narrative that NASA gives you. It's like, I don't know. I haven't been up there.
It becomes an all-encompassing ideology, and it's who cares? It's not like there's an either or, some sort of dialectic, but it's like it saps people's energy purposefully when look around you and everything is so the country, for just to start with, is completely corrupt and rotten, and the whole system we're living in is everything's upside down. We're in clown world, infinity level. So
sure.
I just,
and there's so many psyops to make you look stupid too, that just reeks of one of those. You know what I mean? And I'm just not smart enough or educated, informed enough to be able to distinguish which one of those proofs are true. Both sides present these proofs, and I'm like, I honestly, I'm just not smart enough to know which one's which. So
yeah, same. Not sure what to think. I just focus on what I would consider the most important things for my life. So I think Baze makes a great point. It's like we're literally in Tomorrowland. Like, this is the Twilight Zone, and so I'm just trying to keep things right ways up at this point, because everything seems to be
retarded, folks.
Yeah.
I agree.
Well, guys, I want to give a special shout out to Dean Lim 2, Lyra, Ross Campbell, the Big 7-Footer, Chase Haggard, Mickey C, BMX 1966, Orthodox Boomer Grandma, and Ross Campbell 12. Thank you guys all so much for your support, and major thank you to everybody who joined today. I really appreciate Clinton for being such a good sport and being civil in our conversation. Jerry, Baze, anything you guys want to leave here? Shill your stuff. Feel free.
I gotta say, it's good to see Jerry here.
Good to see you
too, bro.
And pray for Chase, because he was too sick to do the stream with me the other night. We got one coming up. I'm going to show my channel. We are doing a stream on 21st century doomed love, and how AI plays a part in this, in the movie Her, and then Lost in Translation. So that's a big one coming up. And also, I was on TNT Radio Live today with Hesher, so please go over to that app and check them out. So thank you, buddy. Good to see you, DPH.
Nice.
Somebody has a request for you, Baze. They said sell us some pillows.
I'm trying to think of something here.
I want to hear about the Giza dream sheets, dude. That's what
I want to hear about. Yeah,
I don't know why Giza is such a place for the cotton when we have this whole country that makes cotton. But look, all I know is that I was sleeping rough for many years, and I filled my pillows with this garbage rubber. But it takes a minute, but then it form fits to your giant head. You can sleep in the tunnels with it.
Oh, man.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lindell.
I actually have 3 My Pillows.
Nice.
Are they
Yeah,
good?
good pillows.
Don't you have to throw them in the dryer or something?
Well, they're filled with rubber garbage, and they are terrible at first, but then, like, after 3 years, they become pretty good. I got him when he first started. Like, he first started that company, and actually, the first time I saw his commercial, I whoever I was with, I turned to him and I said, "This guy was this guy a crackhead?" And then I looked it up on Wikipedia, and he was.
Oh, he beams crackhead energy, as the kids say. He beams it for sure.
Excuse me, sir. X, right? X is a successful entrepreneur, and he's part of the complex that's going to save this country.
Absolutely.
That's true. That's true.
Big
They're
faith
fighting the deep state. Jerry,
Yep.
give your channel a shout out and what you're up to.
Yeah, so Exposing Powerful Lies live streams on YouTube and on Rumble. You guys can follow me over there. Just today we did a stream with my with the priest from my parish, Father Andrew Hammond. So we wrapped up, and that's when I hopped over here. So go check
Great.
that out. And
Yeah, go
I do a
check
lot
that
of
out.
shows with Baselit Analyzer, and all the usual suspects over here. So yeah, that's it.
Yeah, well, thanks for hopping on, brother. We appreciate you.
Yeah, it's good to see you, man. It's
Good to see you, man. Good to see you.
Happy to hear about the engagement. You guys didn't get married yet, did you?
Nope.
Okay.
Engaged. She we're gonna be living together here pretty soon. We're gonna be getting legally married. So she's from Germany, and
Yeah.
so she'll be moving here in just 2 weeks. So
that's great. Man.
Yeah.
Nice.
Glory to
Awesome.
God. Well, yeah, really happy to see you still
Thank you,
doing the
brother.
YouTube and keep growing the channel and God bless you, man.
Thank you very much, bro. Well, we appreciate you guys. Thanks so much for hopping on. And I will be back Sunday. I'm not sure with what topic, but I will be back streaming Sunday or Monday, most likely Sunday. So thank you, everybody, for the super chats. Thank you, Jerry and Bays, for hopping on. And until next time, as always, God bless.
Peace, y'all.